Update us on Wounded Warriors. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. All right, it looks like everybody that we've got right now is back in. So if you guys are all set and ready to get going, we'll get Tony Towns here to give us a presentation on the Wounded Warrior program.
Get up there. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tony Towns, and I was asked to come today to give you some information, update, and future plans for the Wounded Warrior events that we hold at SRS. So I'm going to give you an overview and a little bit of history first, and then tell you where we're headed from here. The deer hunt is the one that we started first. That was started back in 2000, and it is managed by whoever the current M&O contractor is, currently SRS. We began to focus more on Wounded Warriors in 2013 and reach out to groups like Augusta Warrior Project and Upstate Warrior Solutions and Wounded Warriors and folks like that. The hunt has kind of evolved over the years. Initially, it was a dog hunt, just like all our other hunts out there. But we realized over time that some of these Wounded Warriors and mobility impaired folks just couldn't react quickly enough to get a shot off at a running deer. So I guess about 5 years ago, we started doing still hunts for them, where we put out a feeder and let them just hunt from a blind. The hunts are held late October to mid-November, and all participants on all of these hunts are escorted by badged site employees. They can harvest deer and hogs. They can also harvest coyotes if they choose to, but the deer and hogs they take home, and all the animals are monitored on all these hunts for season 137 before they're released. And we have a hunter database that we've had since the hunt started, and all these hunters, when they come out one time, their name is put in this database, and we keep a cumulative total if they get any dose at all. But last year, none of the animals at all had any dose associated with them. So the doses are coming down from years past. Back in 2004, we started a turkey hunt for Wounded Warriors and mobility impaired. And for this hunt, we work with the Forest Service and the National Wild Turkey Federation. And all the applications are handled through the Turkey Federation, and they make the selection. And this is a 2-day event. We have hunts on Friday, Saturday mornings. What we do is we'll take a fairly large portion of the site, about a third of the site. And each escort will be given an area that's often a mile long and half a mile wide. So they got a good area to hunt in, and they go out. These guys go out a month ahead of time, put in a lot of time scouting, listening for turkeys, trying to find the right place so that when these guys come out, they can set them up in a spot where they have a good chance for success. And you see the guys in the wheelchairs, and we had a guy a number of years back. He was a Marine veteran, had lost both legs in Afghanistan, and he was out on a hunt one day with a Forest Service guy. And sometimes the turkeys don't come to you. You have to move a little bit and go to them. And the turkey wouldn't quite come where they wanted, and this guy's in a wheelchair. They couldn't get there. So the guy at the Forest Service put this guy on his back, carried him down in the woods where they set up, and he got the turkey. So it's a phenomenal experience for the escorts as well as the guys that get to come out and hunt, because a lot of these guys can't do this somewhere else. We set it all up. We take them out in the woods. We do everything to get them ready. And the success rate out here, Turkey Federation does 50 to 60 of these hunts nationwide every year. And they have said many times that the hunt at SRS is by far the best one that they do anywhere. Some of these guys get to come back over and over again, and they actually establish relationships with the escorts that take them out. They develop friendships, and some of these guys end up getting out to go out and hunt with these guys on their own private property. We started in 2015 with a fishing challenge. We do this on L Lake, and 15 to 20 guys participate. I didn't say on the other one. On the deer hunt, it's about usually 30 to 35 guys out there. The turkey hunt, somewhere between 25 and 30 that we're able to take out, just because we have to have enough escorts and enough room. We make sure that everybody's far enough apart that nobody's going to be in any danger of getting shot. 15, 20 guys in the fishing tournament. We have a bass club from upstate South Carolina that comes out and runs this just like a real bass tournament. They weigh the fish, everything is released back into the lake. The guys bring their own boats, all the escorts do, bring their own boats out there. And we have guys in wheelchairs, they'll put them in their boats, and it's just, this is one event where on a deer hunt or a turkey hunt, maybe 25, 30% of the guys might get to see an animal, get a chance to take something. You go out here on L Lake, everybody's in the action from the minute it starts. They've been out there and with 20 boats out there for 4 hours, caught 400 to 600 fish. These guys have just never seen anything like it in their lives. It's just an incredible event. And again, these guys, when they come back the next year, if they get to, they ask for the same guide or escort, and they end up developing a friendship with them. And for this one, we actually do we set up a table and do prizes for the most weight in the fish, the biggest fish. And these guys get to go home with some great pictures and a trophy maybe. Future plans. We're looking at how can we do more of this. We have guys sometimes that we have to turn away because we just don't have enough spots for them. So what we're looking at is possibility of adding a second turkey hunt. The season is fairly short, but if we plan well, we can work in a second hunt out there with the Turkey Federation. Also looking at adding a second fishing challenge. Forest Service is currently working down at Parr Pond to see if they can set up an area. The biggest problem we have is being able to get all the boats in the water and get the guys in the wheelchairs or mobility impaired into the boats. So we're looking at making an area down at Parr Pond where you can park some more trucks and vehicles and put a dock in out there, because Parr Pond is legendary. I mean, there's people all over the country and even all over the world have heard of Parr Pond. And also on these events, you see everybody down for a meal there. On the turkey hunt and the fishing tournament, the Turkey Federation comes out and sets up a table, and they do a silent auction and lots of cool stuff. The Aiken-Sertoma Club and the Aiken chapter of Turkey Federation provide all the food. At the deer hunt is a site employee who has a catering service. He puts on a buffet for these guys you would not believe. So it's all volunteers. Everything's done out there is volunteers. We'll be meeting with the Turkey Federation in the next week or so to see how much support they can give us for this, because this takes a lot of their time. They run the application process, and if people want to know how to get in on these, the SRS website has the deer hunt up there. The National Wild Turkey Federation website puts up the fishing tournament and the turkey hunt. This young man last year won a trophy for the biggest fish out of his wheelchair. Any comments or questions?
It's for Mr. Towns. Joyce, let's start with you.
Joyce Underwood, CAB, you said that you were exploring other possibilities
Yes.
for hunts. If you can't get what you'd like with the turkeys and the fishing, is there any possibility of opening it up to different kinds of game?
Yes, there is, especially for hogs maybe. You know, the deer hunt you have to do during deer season. All the game at Savannah River site belongs to the state of South Carolina. Even though it's federal property, it belongs to the state, and we have to go by all the state game laws. So we can't hunt deer outside of deer season. Hogs you can hunt year-round.
Does South Carolina have gator hunting? Is that an option?
We should.
Yeah, they do. They do. They do, but on SRS, you know, there's a lot of research been going on gators for years, so
Right.
that would be a tough sell with the ecology lab, I'm sure.
Okay.
Hogs are an opportunity, possibly coyotes, a predator hunt.
Well,
So
thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna meet with the Turkey Federation. The big thing is, you know, how many of these can they support? And we've got one guy in Aiken with the Sertoma Club who cooks on every one of these things. You know, can they provide the food for all these hunts? So we're definitely looking at doing an extra turkey hunt and an extra deer hunt. That would put us up to 5 events there. There may be other things we can do, and we're going to look at that. Yeah.
Mr. Howard.
Yes, sir.
Doug Howard Cab. I'm a 28-year veteran of the United States Army, and I would like to personally thank you for what you're doing for these soldiers, because it means a lot for them. And just to see from this side what you all are doing also, inspires me also. So thank you very much.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your service, and it's an honor to do this.
I believe Bobby.
Bobby Williams, Cap. I have a few questions. You used to do hunts in the mornings and afternoons, but are they just mornings now?
For which hunts now?
The deer hunt?
The regular deer hunts?
Yes.
They're just mornings now.
Okay.
And the reason for that is coyotes. Pure and simple, it's coyotes. The population used to be much greater than it is now. And they did some research out there a few years ago and found that coyotes are eating 75% of the fawns every year. So if we have 2,000 fawns born in a year, coyotes eat 1,500 of them. So the deer just are not there to hunt in those numbers anymore.
And these are dog-driven hunts?
They are. Now, we're looking at some other options now, too. We're looking at some still hunts, but the success rate is just so low.
And how does a hunter get chosen to participate in the hunt?
In the regular deer hunts?
Yes.
It's a lottery.
You have a lottery?
Yes, ma'am. So they can go online and apply. It's on the SRS website,
Okay.
and they can apply for it, and it's a computer lottery to select them.
And what about the volunteers for the Wounded Warrior?
The volunteers,
How are they chosen?
they just need to call the Forest Service, tell MEMS at the Forest Service, and get on the list because everybody wants to do it.
Okay.
But as we expand these, there'll be more opportunities for the escorts as well.
And you said you monitor the turkeys for cesium-137
We do.
before they're released. How do you do that?
They have a field monitor detector that they take out in the woods, and they lay the turkey down on a steel plate to stop background from being detected. And they just put the monitor on top of the turkey, and they have phantoms with a known amount of radioactivity. You just can compare to the turkey. And we have never had a turkey that registered any dose whatsoever. There's not a lot of meat on them.
Okay, thank you.
David Hoyle, Cab. Tony, a really worthy practice that the Savannah Riverside does, putting on these hunts. I'm curious, with ever increasing austere budgets at Savannah Riverside as well as other DOE sites, I imagine there's probably some pressure that DOE feels to cut down on these hunts because of the cost that it may cost DOE or its contractors. Are you experiencing that?
No. We have incredible support from management. As a matter of fact, our management has suggested that we increase these hunts. The cost to the government is minimal. These are all volunteers. A few Forest Service hours, overtime. Everybody else is a volunteer. They bring their own boats. Some of you guys even bring the guns out for these guys to hunt with. They volunteer their time. They go out before or after work to scout for deer or turkeys. These guys go out on the turkey hunts. They'll go out before daylight a month ahead of time, 2 or 3 times a week, and just call and listen for turkeys so they know where to go. But it's volunteers. And the food is provided by the Sertoma Club or by a private individual on these hunts.
I'm very glad to hear that. What does it take to be one of these guides or escorts?
You need to be a badged employee, number one. And you need to have a little bit of knowledge about what you're doing. Other than that, that's it. And be willing to put in the time. But the hunters they have a good time. But these escorts, excuse me, they say it's a highlight of their year coming out to do this. It's worth the effort for everybody out there.
That's really cool. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, you too.
Michael.
Michael Michelanis, DOE. I just want to emphasize one of the points that Tony was making, because I'm the management that's been very supportive of expanding this. These programs, particularly the mobility and impaired and wounded warriors, they're done at no cost to the government. There is a little bit to the Forest Service, but for the Department of Energy, it needs to be volunteers. So when he says the National Wild Turkey Foundation, Sertoma Club, we could not do these without their support, because they bring the resources, they bring the food for the hunters, they do a lot of the organizing, and then the charitable donations of the time that the workers are willing to spend going out into the field helps us. And we have to do this anyway because the wildlife is a resource that has to be managed. If we don't manage it, it's going to overrun the site and you'll get out of control. We'd have to hire people to come in and hunt it anyway. So here's an opportunity to give something back to the warriors who fought for the country, and I'm a very big supporter of expanding this program and opening it up first to Fort Gordon and other wounded warriors in the areas we expand it first. So this is really important to us.
Dawn?
Dawn Gillis Cab. It's more of a comment than a question. The last few years that I worked out there, driving out to L area, I found lots of turkey.
Oh, yeah, the turkeys,
Had to be careful not to hit lots of turkey, especially during baby turkey season.
the turkeys have not suffered the same fate as the deer.
No, yeah, they're not. That's strange that the coyotes wouldn't go after turkey.
Well, they will.
Huh? But they're not as.
No, it's they get the fawns mostly when they're born.
Ah, okay.
And supposedly, newborn fawns don't have any scent, but the birthing process cannot be scent-free.
There you
So
go.
the coyotes that time of year, that's what they search for.
Ah, okay.
When the Forest Service did their research on finding out how what they did, they implanted transmitters in the female, in the deer, and when the fawn was born, the transmitter dropped out, and it would turn on, and they go pick the fawn up when it's born and put a collar on it.
Okay.
And the doe would just stand off in the woods and watch and not come out. So the fawn essentially lays there for hours and sometimes don't move much for days. Turkeys are born walking.
Yeah. Right. Yep. But there were lots of them out there.
There are.
All right, anything else, folks? Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
All right, oh, there you go. And up next, we have Rob Pope with EPA. Forward, backwards, laser.
Yep, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. So I'm going to tell you why the heck I'm here. I'm going to talk a little bit about EPA in general and Superfund, which is the nickname for the law that we use to oversee the cleanup at Savannah River site and most of the DOE complex sites, as well as hundreds of private sites. And then how it applies to SRS and our involvement in the cleanup. So just a little bit about EPA. This is our mission: protect human health and the environment. Independent agency. We're not in any other department, not yet at least. We're formed in 1970. Like all other laws, Congress writes the laws that we enforce, so we don't invent our own laws. And we write the regulations like every other regulatory agency to implement those laws and enforce those regulations. And then we set a lot of national standards under those laws. Now, a lot of programs that the EPA has in their purview are actually delegated to states. So the state of South Carolina is fully delegated for our Clean Water Act, our Clean Air Act, for the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, which is the solid waste and industrial waste cleanup rule and how to build landfills. So that's all South Carolina, and they implement that in this state. But this law, the Superfund law, is not delegatable. It was written by Congress to be kept at the federal level. This is how EPA is set up in 10 regions around the country. Region 4 is pretty much the southeast. And Hanford is out there in Washington under Region 10. We are lucky to have not only Savannah River site, but also Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant in Kentucky and Oak Ridge Reservation in Tennessee as MPL sites that we work on in our region. So there's just a little close-up of our region. Very different states with very different setups on how they do their own environmental cleanups. We even have one state, Mississippi, who is not fully authorized for the RCRA law and has informed us in no uncertain terms over the past 20 years that they have no intention of authorizing their state agency to enforce that law. And of course, you know, the environment we work in here in South Carolina in the CSRA is very different to what we might work in Florida or even on the coast of Mississippi, or in the mountains of North Carolina. So you have to have a wide variety of abilities to work in these variant states. So what we call Superfund actually has a real name. The Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act started in 1980 and then had a major amendment in 1986. Since then, it's had very small amendments going back and forth. The reason it's called a Superfund was it started with a tax on chemical companies under the premise that many of the problems we were cleaning up had been caused by chemical companies, or at least they contributed to them in some way, and so they would pay a tax. That tax sunsetted quite some time ago and has not been reinstated, but that tax was used to create a fund that the federal government would use to clean up the sites that were abandoned. So SRS obviously is not abandoned, but there are sites that we work on where the company has gone bankrupt and just left the premises, and that's what that fund was for. When we have a company that is still around and can clean up their own site, we try, it's a theory called enforcement first. We try to get them to clean it up. And Superfund has this nice little bat that Congress gave us that says, if you don't clean it up and we have to clean it up for you, we get to charge you triple damages, which usually makes them want to clean it up. So that's really good. That's good for the government. That's good for the taxpayer because it means we're not expending EPA resources or taxpayer dollars on cleaning up somebody else's mess. And the fund was really for sites that have been completely abandoned. So it was a reactive law. Basically, it was established in response to things like Love Canal. Almost everybody's heard of Love Canal, but have you heard of the Valley of Drums? Yeah, some people have. That's great. So this was a place where somebody started taking drums of any kind of hazardous waste or oily substance that anybody wanted to get rid of and just throwing them basically into a valley, theoretically stacking them, but most of the stacks fell over and they didn't care, and they just kept taking them and taking people's money to take them, and then the site was abandoned. And it was just as big a mess as Love Canal. The interesting thing is, you know, we have all these movies where they show the military coming out and responding to a chemical disaster. Well, they actually don't have those resources. And until Superfund was enacted, we had no way as the federal government of reacting to things like Love Canal or, you know, back in the day when the Ohio River caught fire. We had no way to do that. We didn't have a law that said this is how Coast Guard will do this is how EPA will do this. And so that's what the law was set up for, to find a way to do it. Like I said, it provides us the authority, which didn't exist before. All of this is set up in the National Contingency Plan. So this is the regulations, the rules on how we do all this, and establishes what we call the risk level that triggers a cleanup action, which strangely enough, I've been having discussions with Sandra. Wave your hand, Sandra, back there in the state about the risk levels. So we talk about we want to keep things clean enough that less than 1 in a million people would be impacted by excessive cancer that they didn't choose to be impacted by. So this is not for people that are doing something that might give them cancer, like drinking or smoking, but some chemical that they didn't say, hey, I want to be exposed to that chemical. We don't want them to be more than 1 in a million exposed. But our trigger for cleanup is actually 1 in 100,000. So when we say it's a 1 in 10 to the minus 4 risk, you might hear that a good bit. We're cleaning up so that 1 in 100,000 people won't be impacted, but we want to try to clean up to 1 in a million. That's how they set up this regulation, which seems like really big numbers, but it's better than most lotteries. How many people have played the lottery? That's all? 4 people in this whole room have played the lottery? You guys really took a lot of statistics in school, didn't you? Because your chances of winning the lottery are worse than 1 in 10 to the minus 6. All right. And then in 1987, somebody said, hey, you know what? We're cleaning up all these private sites like Love Canal and Valley of the Drums, but what about all these federal facilities that aren't getting cleaned up? And so we had Executive Order 12580 was signed in 1987. Who was the president in 1987? Reagan. So a Republican put this into place. It said, DOE and DOD, you have the authority to clean up your own sites, and you need to start doing it. And then it said, you're the lead agency. However, you have to do it the way EPA has already laid out to do it throughout the country. So you have to follow our guidance, EPA's rules, and EPA will get to decide whether or not you've done it correctly. So that's why we're here at Savannah River Site. That's why we are at military bases and other federal facilities across the country. So like I said, they're subject to CERCLA just like pick your chemical company or any other place that has to be cleaned up. So this is supposed to show you the MPL sites in our region. This actually is an outdated map, and we have several more sites now, but you can kind of see there's a fair number in South Carolina. We really have a lot more in Florida than this map shows, but this gives you an idea. They're all the way across the region. And like I said, we are lucky to have these other DOE facilities in our region that we work with besides Savannah River Site. Oak Ridge, which I'm sure you've heard about, Paducah, which is a much smaller facility, but also a DOE facility that's under cleanup. And we used to work with Pinellas Plant in Florida, which was a small DOE facility, but that never became an MPL site, a Superfund site, so we deferred it to Florida when they got their RCRA authority, which was late 90s, early 2000s. We also work with all these other military facilities. Some of them are MPL sites. A number of them were what we call base realignment enclosure sites. We had a number of these in South Carolina back in the 90s and early 2000s. Charleston Air Force Base, Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, Naval Sub Base Charleston. All those things were bracked and changed. And we worked on those to help get them cleaned up. I also work at a place called Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, Florida, which is one of our MPL sites. So a little bit just about SRS. It made the list in 1989. There was much celebration on site, I'm sure. So they were required to have a federal facilities agreement, which is basically a legal agreement that lays out they'll do this and EPA will do this. And we always have three-party agreements in our region, which means the state signs them as well and the state commits to do things. So these are kind of the big statutes, the big laws that apply to the cleanup. The Superfund law, the hazardous waste law, which is RCRA, the Oil Pollution Control Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, which really hits up a lot of what we have to work on because it says you'll keep the groundwater clean to this level so that people can drink it. And all of the groundwater at Savannah River Site is classified by the state of South Carolina as potential drinking water. So there's no place on SRS where they said, you know what, we're just going to write that off. That does happen in some places, but that's not the case on site. So the goal is to everywhere on site someday have all the water at a level that is safe to come out of your tap and drink. I will tell you that is not where we are now. We have made great strides just in the few years that I've been working on Savannah River Site, but there's a lot of contaminated water out of there. It's a large industrial facility, and they use the standard technologies of the day in the 50s and 60s and 70s of pretty much putting it in waste in seepage basins, and that has caused contamination in the groundwater. So then the other one is the Clean Water Act, which this goes to the surface water bodies, and the Clean Air Act, so that when we are cleaning up something, we don't just discharge into the air or have asbestos go into the air, things like that. A little bit more about our FFA. So I told you back here that they went on the list in 1989, and it took us 4 years to negotiate an agreement on how we would move forward and get things done. SRS was still doing some cleanup at that time. There was some cleanup going on under state authority and DOE's own authority, but as far as a three-party agreement, this one didn't get finalized until 1993. And 4 years seems like a long time, but we've got facilities that we negotiated with for over a decade before we got them to the table to actually sign. So it lays out how we do things, all our schedules, any penalties, what's an enforceable milestone. Every agreement is very site-specific. So here at SRS, we have the high-level waste tanks written into our agreement. At Oak Ridge, for instance, they don't have any high-level waste tanks written into their agreement because they don't have any. At Tyndall Air Force Base, we have a whole big thing about their ranges because they have a lot of ranges out there from practicing that are written into our agreement. Of course, we don't have that at Savannah River Site because the ranges here are very small and minor. So we're supposed to do oversight of the remedial actions at Savannah River site. So that's the cleanup of the soil, sediment, surface water, groundwater. We're supposed to make sure that DOE adheres to these laws and regulations and all the guidance. We also help DOE by offering technical and procedural assistance on how to move things through the system, as well as new technologies to try out. And DOE and SRS in particular, and SRNS and its precursors have had a great track record of trying all kinds of innovative technologies and then finding some that don't work very well and other ones that work really well and continuing to implement those. And then we provide a lot of information. We have a lot of guidance and training that we do. And several DOE people have come over over the years to the Atlanta office and taking our training, or they've flown to another location where we're giving training and have had different classes. So we've had DOE folks take remedial process classes and risk assessment classes and things like that. So when it comes down to deciding how we're going to clean up and what we're going to clean up, we produce a document called a Record of Decision. And that document has to be signed by DOE, by EPA, and by the state of South Carolina. So that says, this is the contamination we found, this is what we propose to clean it up, and this is how we're going to clean it up. So that implements everything we're going to do and how they're going to operate. And then also we have to determine whether or not that remedy was successful. So a lot of the remedies we implement take more than 5 years to do the job they need to do. Or we choose to do things like cap waste and leave it in place, but make sure no one can get to it and that it can't get to the groundwater. In order to do that, we go back and check every 5 years wherever we left waste in place or we have a system still operating, and we have to determine whether or not the remedy is being successful and protective. Both EPA and the state have to do that with DOE. And we've had really good success at Savannah River site because of the early involvement. I talked earlier on my agency update yesterday about how we're moving forward on the lower 3 runs, which includes Parr Pond. Well, before we even started talking about the investigation, we spent about a year early on working with DOE and with the state of South Carolina on all the data that has been gathered on that surface water body and all those cooler ponds, because SREL has been there for literally 5 decades gathering data. So we wanted to see how much of that data we could use. So that's an example of how we're involved really early, and very often those meetings were about once a quarter to try and get all that data digested and figuring out what we still needed that we didn't have and how to put the document together. This is the list of people that we have working on the site right now. Myself, Jennifer Tufts, Deidre Lloyd, John Richards, and Kyle Bryant. You may have seen Deidre or John at a CAB meeting in the past. They will fill in for me occasionally. And then Kyle, he comes to some CAB meetings, but mainly when we're doing our community meetings that we used to call EJ meetings, or if it's a treat workshop, he's the person that's really good working directly with the community like that, so he tends to do that. And Kyle is also involved in multiple sites across the region, so his time that we get him, we're very grateful for, but we don't get enough of it. These are some of the support people we have. This is just a really short list because we have a lot more. We do have a contractor that helps us a good bit. The contract is currently held by the company TechLaw, which is a national environmental firm, and you might see someone out there occasionally that has a shirt on that says EPA contractor or that says TechLaw, and that means they're out there working for us, filling in, being our eyes and ears, or giving us some specialty that we don't have access to. So this is just kind of a list of things that the project managers do. I don't want to belabor this too much. We talked about this already. However, so these are the people that kind of do the grunt work. And then once we decide, hey, we've got all the information we need, EPA and the state and DOE are in agreement about what we're going to do, we have to go take it to our management and then convince them this is the right thing to do. We should dig up this soil, we should cap this soil, we should add oil to the groundwater to help the contaminants break down, whatever it is. So it's the RPM's job, kind of the grunt person, to present all that to EPA management. And the thing that gets lost a lot is that our management literally sees remedies put in place at tens to hundreds of other MPL sites across the country and across the region. And so when we come to them and say, hey, we're working on an SRS, that big 310 square mile Department of Energy facility, it is no more important to them than the 2-acre site that's in the middle of somebody's neighborhood. So that's one of the things we often struggle with is that, we know how important you guys think Savannah Riverside is to this whole community. But when we go brief our management, it's just one more site out of 8 states that have lots of sites. So we often have to overcome that a little bit. So when we are about to do something, you guys will have the opportunity to see a proposed plan that DOE has put together and EPA and the state have approved, and can make comments on it. All those proposed plans go to the information repository, and there's public notices that get sent out through the environmental bulletin if you want to make comments on them. DOE writes the record of decision then, taking in all the comments that came at the proposed plan. And EPA and the state review those records of decision and concur on them. And then once DOE signs it, which is usually going to be someone like Michael, then it will move forward to EPA, who will sign it, and the state of South Carolina, who will sign it. But even after we decide what we're going to do, we stay involved. We have regular monitoring on a lot of these sites. A lot of the groundwater remedies take a very long time. And like I said, we do these 5-year reviews. The interesting thing about our 5-year reviews is that they are mandated by the law and the regulation. So we don't really have a choice if we leave any waste in place. We're going to check it every 5 years. So this is a very different system than, for instance, NRC uses. NRC wants you to get everything to a certain state so that you can then walk away from it and not have to come back. They have a monitoring period, but it's relatively short. EPA says if we're going to leave waste in place, we're going to check it every 5 years in perpetuity. So there are decisions we've made here at SRS, like P reactor and R reactor, where lots of radioactivity has been entombed in that reactor. As far as EPA is concerned in the state of South Carolina, we will look at that every 5 years in perpetuity, which means there'll always be someone checking on it. And that's a very different system that NRC uses, where they assume at some point we stop looking at everything and just walk away. So I already talked about that it's a 3-party decision, and I've talked a little bit about our collaboration. Right now, there's a lot of discussion on the national level, because I will tell you that the working relationship that EPA has with South Carolina and with Savannah Riverside through the Department of Energy is actually pretty unique. The working relationship we have with several of the other DOE sites is not nearly as productive. And so this system that has developed at Savannah Riverside of having a core team, which is 3 people really, somebody from DOE, somebody from EPA, and somebody from the state that are the decision makers at any single meeting, is pretty unusual. Usually there's 30 different voices in a meeting room who all think they're the most important person. We get to have our meetings and identify at the beginning, these are the 3 most important people in this meeting today. We're the decision makers. And we have these scoping meetings long before we ever get to a document. So, the standard way that most regulated entities work with their regulator is they put together a document and they hope they followed all the guidance and they did it the way that the regulator wants it, and then they put it in a FedEx box and they ship it off, and it comes back all covered in red, where we don't like what they did. We don't usually operate that way at Savannah Riverside. Usually when they're putting the data together, before they've even got anything on paper, we start having meetings and talking about what the data shows us and what it says and what we're going to do, which is pretty unusual. That's not the common way. The common picture you see is that, you've got SRS over here and there's this giant wall on the other side is South Carolina DHEC and EPA, and SRS throws the document over the wall and we look at it and go, oh, that's crap, and we throw it back. We try really hard not to operate that way at all. And so because we've done this, and then when we have special topics that we might not be working out very well, we'll put together design teams. Because we've done this, it's really being held up on a national level these days of how we might work better at several other DOE sites, and not just DOE, also DOD sites, and make their processes go better. And so there's a big discussion going on now. I'm really a little afraid because it's kind of inside the beltway. Works better when we're out here in the regions and at the sites, in my opinion. But about how to emulate this model a little bit and make it work at more sites. Now, this does not mean that we're always in agreement, and we always think that what SRS and DOE in particular has said is the right thing to do. We're often not in agreement, but we find ways to find agreement, to put it that way. And this is just another list of things that we're working on, but I kind of hit most of these yesterday in my agency update, so I won't belabor that. The one thing I will point out is that, we work a lot on groundwater, but there's also lots of ecology and surface water we work on, and the project manager job in general is kind of a jack of all trades. You can't be just the best engineer or just the best hydrogeologist. You kind of have to know a little bit about all these topics. So we've continued to work with the Shell Bluff community, and we're committed to do that. The REMOP is really taking the lead right now, but we're trying to stay engaged and support them in any way that we can. So that's supporting basically SREL. We did not have any EJ meetings scheduled when I made this slide, but as you heard earlier, we all kind of got our budgets in late May through June. And as I've gotten my budget, I realized that we're going to have a little funding to be able to help with an EJ meeting. So I've already talked to Delisa about trying to do one a little bit later. So we are going to have one scheduled this calendar year. So that's actually an update to that slide. All right, a little bit about high-level waste tanks, which are really specific to Savannah River site in our region, although I've heard there's another site somewhere out west that also has high-level waste tanks, maybe a couple. So this was the deal we had, 22 non-compliant tanks. So what does that mean that they're non-compliant? Does anybody know? Anybody besides David? So it means they don't comply with the UST regs that we make everybody else that has an underground tank, underground storage tank comply with, because they weren't built to comply with them because they were built in the 50s and into the 60s. And so those regs have really changed and be updated because there were no regs in the 50s and 60s about underground storage tanks. So they don't comply with that, and we set in motion when we put those regs in place and we gave them to the states that everybody would start to comply. And there was a deadline that you had to have all of your underground storage tanks comply. And so what you saw across the country was a huge rush to get all of the old tanks out of the ground and new tanks that were double-walled and had leak detection and all of that into the ground. You saw a lot of mom-and-pop gas stations close because they didn't have those kind of tanks, and the people that were giving them gasoline, Shell, Exxon, were like, well, we're not going to pay for those tanks for you. So a lot of them said, well, then this is no longer a cash-making business for us, and they closed down. But here, it's not so easy to just yank a high-level waste tank out of the ground and put in a new double-walled tank. So that was recognized, and we came up with some rules about, all right, you're going to have these tanks emptied and closed by a certain date. We're not making that date, obviously. The original date has actually kind of gone by, or is going to go by here shortly. But we are making progress emptying the tanks and closing the tanks. And so that's our model that we're working to now. There are milestones. Right now, none of those not none, but many of those milestones are just not physically possible for SRS to complete. They were based on the premise that SWPF would be up and running much earlier than it's going to be up and running, and that we would have a much higher pace of cleaning out those tanks and closing them. So we're trying to modify that. We're kind of doing it milestone by milestone. And the tanks are interesting because we decided a long time ago, long before I came into the picture and was involved at SRS, that we would let those tanks be managed under the wastewater rules of the state of South Carolina. And those are the regulations that cover them. So individual tank closures are covered by the South Carolina regulations, not by EPA regulations. But the tank farms themselves would be part of the Superfund process, so that each tank farm, F and H, is a CERCLA operable unit and will have to be closed under CERCLA. And then the tank closure milestones were written into our federal facilities agreement. So for DOE, they're kind of covered under the state wastewater regs, and they're covered by CERCLA. So sometimes a little bit of tension, but we try to find ways to make it all work together. And it's different than we have it out at Hanford, or that they decided to do it at Idaho, or even there was a place called the West Valley Demonstration Project in New York. It's done a little differently there. There have been some other tanks that might have been called high-level waste tanks that through one way or another we didn't quite get there in other places in the country, and they were all handled a little differently. So each site has some specific, site-specific rules about high-level waste tanks. So this is where we are now. DOE has done a performance assessment for the tank farms, or each tank farm, and then they've put together a general closure plan under the state wastewater permit to close them. And the state is the lead for the tanks all the way up through the proposed plan and record of decision that we do in CERCLA. However, the way we wrote it up in the FFA is that the state allows EPA to make comments, and we send them to the state on all of these documents, and then the state can choose to share them with DOE or not. We've had a really good relationship with South Carolina where they have sent our comments on to DOE, South Carolina has lots of capabilities, but we have been able to provide them with some extra capabilities in radiological assessment and radiological risk assessment, and so they have appreciated that, and it's been a really good synergistic relationship. And then after the tanks exit the permit, once they've been emptied and filled with grout, the oversight is done under the FFA per South Carolina and EPA. And then there's this really nice thing in a 2008 or 2005 Appropriations Act that says NRC also has a monitoring role to play on the tank farms and as the tanks close. So we've already done a proposed plan and what we call an interim ROD for each tank farm. And as tanks are closed, and we have closed several already, they are added to that record of decision via something we call an explanation of significant difference. It basically is just an addendum to the record of decision. And then they exit the permit and come into the purely FFA world. And we're committed to keep this going. We know this is of primary interest to the community and all the threats that liquid waste represents. So that's kind of it, and I'm happy to take any questions. This is a self-portrait of when I was a much skinnier person.
Do we have a few quick questions for Rob? We'll do Mary.
Mary Weber Cab, thank you for the presentation. It was very good. I've got a question about, I think it's your slide number 12, the national priorities list.
Go back to it.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you identify the little dots on the map and tell us where they are on the South Carolina side? It looks like there are 4, I feel like I'm at the eye doctor, or 5.
Yeah,
Can
so
you tell us where they are?
The squares are supposed to be MPL sites, and I apologize, I actually don't know them all in South Carolina. I kind of just work federal facilities. So there are a number in South Carolina, and you can kind of see. So I believe this is SRS here. I think that's right. And then the other ones, I just don't know them all. There are a number, though.
I think Naval Station in Charleston.
Yeah, it did not become an MPL site, but I think it is on here as maybe a star. But Myrtle Beach Air Force Base no, it also did not become an MPL site. So these other ones that you see on the coast are most likely private sites. Oh, wait a minute. Parris Island Marine and Recruit Depot is an MPL site. So there is one that's down there that's a federal facility.
I was mainly asking about the ones that look like they're slightly downriver. Yeah.
These down here?
Yeah. Those.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a full list online, but you know what? I commit to you that I'll find out. I'll get a list of all the MPL sites in South Carolina, and I'll send it to James to send out to the cab.
Thank you.
Susan?
Susan Corbett, CAB, just two questions. Recently, the Post and Courier did a pretty damning story. Did they interview you at all or call you at all before they did that story on SRS?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, they should have. Also, do you do like an annual report?
We do an annual report for Superfund in Region 4.
So there will be a section on SRS in your report.
We tend to not have sections on every MPL site in the region, just because that would be too many pages. But so there will be specific things that are pulled out, highlights from various sites.
So is there anywhere to see a detailed analysis, EPA analysis of the site?
On our website, it's a more updated website that you can go to and see a summary of everything that we have at the site.
So you would like list all of the things that you consider to be contaminants and the concerns or whatever?
Yeah, I think all contaminants are listed there on the website, and maybe not every single operable unit, but all the ones that we're currently working on should be there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So when we talk about units at SRS, some of them are very small, like the G area oil seepage basin is maybe an acre, and some of them are very big, like when we talk about T area and TNX area, that's like about a 40-acre area. So they vary in what we've done there.
Is there like a priority, I mean, in terms of like areas that are the largest or with the most contamination, do you have like some kind of a list of
Not
things
really,
that are by
not
the
like that.
most
I mean,
problematic or?
Probably F-tank farm and H-tank farm are the worst and
in
most
this region,
problematic right now.
in this region.
Oh, in this region. No, we don't do it that way. We don't
Okay.
really say like, ABC Chemical Company is the worst and SRS is 50th out of 250. We don't really,
Okay.
we don't rank them that way.
Thank you.
We can tear real quick across down the side here. We'll start with Tom.
Yeah, Tom French, the cab. Rob, I just was curious. I know that Hanford has struggled mightily with their waste tanks. Do they have a endpoint? Have they committed to EPA on when they're going to be closed, or?
So at Hanford, and I don't work on Hanford, so take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Sure.
And in many ways, I try not to be involved with Hanford because, at EPA headquarters, they'll go, well, everybody who works with DOE must know each other, and that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
So at Hanford, the tanks are fairly much covered under the state RCRA rules, and they did not adopt the part of the law that says you can take the tank waste and take out the high-level stuff and send the low-level stuff to Saltstone like we do at SRS. They did not accept that at all, so they have this idea that they will vitrify all of their waste out of the tanks, low-level and high-level. And I don't know what their end date is.
Okay.
Doug Howard, Cap. Back in the early 90s, I was stationed out at Fort Lewis, Washington. And during that time, we had a big problem on the wooded areas of Fort Lewis with a lot of illegal drug-making labs out there, such as meth labs. Do you all get involved in the cleanup of any of those?
So yes, not Rob, but yes, we do. What tends to happen with those is they are emergency response projects, much like a train wreck or a truck overturning or something like that. And so the agencies that are going after the criminals do their thing, go in, break up the lab, arrest the people that they can, gather all the evidence they need to prosecute them, and then they turn them over to usually our emergency response people, as well as their own state's emergency response people for the cleanup. Because the chemicals they're using and the concentrations they're using them at are, of course, toxic and hazardous, not just for drug use, but I mean, they're not good chemicals to be around for long term anyway. So that, yes, we have done a lot of cleanups like that across the country. But like I said, it's usually an emergency response effort.
Joyce?
Joyce Underwood, CAB. I'm looking at your map on slide 4. And I was wondering how you guys divide up your regions. Is it by population?
Politics.
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
It's pure politics. In DC inside the Beltway, I'm sure negotiations as the EPA was forming were being done to where each regional office would be. So regional offices tend to be in major cities. We're in Atlanta, kind of one of the major cities in the southeast. Philadelphia covers this region. This region is downtown New York. Their office is really, really in Manhattan. The office for this region is in Boston. Here we're in Dallas, Kansas City, Chicago, Seattle, and San Francisco. And the fact that Puerto Rico and the Virginia Islands are covered by people in New York is just a fluke. They had to give them something for having Jersey, I think.
Well, what I was wondering is, does it put an undue burden on certain regions having maybe more stuff to have to clean up than others? For example, I know in our region you've got 2 different nuclear sites, because there's one here and one in Tennessee, and one in Florida.
Yeah.
So 3 that I know of.
Kentucky.
And Kentucky, there you go. That's a lot in one region, you know.
Well, they gave all the hard work to the best region. So, but I mean, the regions are very different. If you're in Region 8, you don't know anything about coastal cleanups because, this is what you have. And, if you're in Region 4, we don't know nearly as much about mining cleanups as they do. So specialists do kind of develop. I mean, we have mines. There's actually a mine here in South Carolina that's always in the news to be cleaned up. But we have some mines here, but nothing like they have out west. So, and we have very few Native American issues in our region. We have a few, mostly in Florida, and some in North Carolina, but not very many. But you go out to these western regions, and they have a lot of Native American issues. So there is a wide variety. We don't have Hawaii, but we have Parris Island.
Do Eleanor, then Bob, and then we're going to need to move on, folks. Okay.
Eleanor Hobson Cab. My concern is the Shell Bluff area.
Right.
What are the issues there? I need clarity. I'm hearing of meetings now taking place.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the last slides. But so in Shell Bluff, that community has come to the cab and commented about how there's no real monitoring in their community on the Georgia side of the river, or not enough monitoring, and the monitoring that EPD did in the past, the state of Georgia, was discontinued. And so you guys put together the recommendation to DOE to address that concern. And in response, SREL is going to do a monitoring program that's going to go over really about 2 years. And so that program that I keep calling the REMOP, which Megan Winsler, I think, came and spoke yesterday at public comment period. She's the outreach coordinator for that program for SREL. So they're going to do some sampling over the next couple of years in the Shell Bluff community to try and address that concern about what is there now. And so in the past, that community, and maybe one of the Shell Bluff folks, I see Annie Laura back there, will speak at public comment too. But there's been a concern about radiation in that community that might be from Savannah River site, or other contamination that might be from Savannah River site, be it tritium or plutonium or arsenic or chromium. And so SREL is going to do some sampling of radioactive isotopes and heavy metals in Shell Bluff area to see what they see. And then we're going to look at that information and see if there's something to be concerned about that we should work on. And right now, I believe Megan is trying to have 1 meeting per month, or 1 day per month, where she has meetings with short outreach messages to the community. And she's holding those meetings in a room at the Burt County Library in Waynesboro. Mm-hmm. And she had, first set was yesterday, and she's going to have one, the next one's August 21st. And she'll have 4 meetings that day, I believe.
So it's not just the water. It is.
No, so SREL plans on sampling groundwater, so people's wells, surface water from streams. They plan on sampling vegetation, I assume that will be a mixture of things like leaves and grass clippings as well as things from people's garden in the area. They plan on doing some soil sampling and sediment sampling, so that should be from the streams and ponds and from Savannah River itself. And I think they may be doing some air sampling too, but I can't remember specifically. Are they also planning air sampling? So that's in addition to what SRS already does to their environmental monitoring program, but it's more focused on Shell Bluff, which SRS is kind of along the whole river corridor.
Thank you.
I'm going to withdraw because we're getting late.
Oh, I was really looking forward to that, Bob.
Bob Dorr, I'll be real quick. I think you did a wonderful presentation today. It's very interesting to see how the activities of the EPA really do protect our water and our air. And that's really the core mission, in my opinion, of what the EPA is all about. So it's very reassuring, for both government entities and I think with private industry too. I think the EPA is doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll endorse that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. All right. Next up, we have Rick McLeod, who's going to cover the Community Reuse Organization for us.
Okay. I think I got it. Good afternoon. Good to be with you all again. I think James sends me an email and it says Sandman. I think it's because it's nap time. You usually bring me in about 1:30, 2 o'clock when I try to do these presentations. But I'm mainly here because the main purpose, Strategic and Legacy Management, has asked for an update on what the CRO has been doing. I guess we did this about a year ago or 2 years ago. Can't remember. 2 years, okay. So we've kind of done a lot. So we'll get into some of those. Some of you are new and do not know what a community reuse organization is, why they were formed. Actually, Rob mentioned 1993 was a popular date in the federal government because they created what was called community reuse organizations at that time. DOE made a commitment to look at financial assistance, mainly around economic development, and mainly because of workforce transition. Some of you were around, I think, in early 90s. Some of you may or may not have heard of K-Reactor Restart. There were 25,000 people at the Savannah River site during that time period. When the federal government decided they were not going forward with K-Reactor Restart, that workforce transition period started, and we saw that number go from 25 to around 14,000 people in about a 3-year period of time. So that was going on across the complex as well at other sites. So DOE said, well, let's set up these community reuse organizations to help find other economic development vitalities or other venues that the workers could probably go into. Some of you mentioned being in the military. Some of y'all remember closing all the military bases was actually around this same time period, 1993. So all the BRAC closures is what they called them. And when they closed military installations, DOE set up what was called redevelopment authorities for installations that were being closed. Those are supposed to help the community reinvest, reuse the military installation. That's about the closest comparison I can give you to a community reuse organization. Started out with 15 across the whole DOE complex, and there are 8 that exist today. Again, we're more of a regional economic development entity, and I'll tell you a little bit why in another slide. We're coming on 25 years of being in existence. Actually, next year will be our 25th anniversary. I'll get a little bit into our makeup of our board, but it's really made up of business leaders. We have all 4 economic developers in the region on my board. Chamber of Commerce is on my board. We have representation for each of the county councils on my board. We have board members that are elected by congressional folks, and then so we're basically a lot of community leaders on the board, and you'll see a little bit later where they come from. We used to be called SARDI. Some of you may be around and remember SARDI's name, but in 2006 we changed our name to the SRS Community Reuse Organization. We were designated as the community reuse organization by DOE in 1996. So, going back to board members, we got 22 board members, 11 from each state. Remember I said we were a multi-county, multi-state CRO. We're one of the few. I think Paducah's the other one that is a two-state, multi-county CRO. Again, we're a private, nonprofit 501c3. So even though SRS is in our name and we get all their mail, not some of their mail, just kidding, Thomas, we get some of the mail. We're not affiliated with the site in any direct connection to the federal government. I'm going to talk today about 3 main focus areas. We'll do a lot more than this, but with time I can only probably touch these, and hopefully I can get us done in time. Economic development, workforce, and community issues, and I'll get a little bit more into what those mean. But I'm going to talk about, from economic development, assets that we get from the site and what do we do with those assets. Then I'm going to talk about workforce, and this may actually help with set up Carol Berry's retention recruitment talk next. And then something I'm going to talk to y'all about is not official yet. Actually, the draft has been out. I'm going to give you a teaser on the SRS economic impact study that we just completed. The final will roll out, or I will give it to my board members on Thursday. So you'll get a little teaser on some of the information that is in there. I'm sure the CAB will get a copy of the final document when it's available. So let's talk about asset transition plan. Again, we said DOE may set up these CROs, which they did. And there was a list of responsibilities that a CRO had to do. One was develop a local economic development plan. How do you plan on using assets from the site? And then you had to describe the personal property, and we've done all those. So these are kind of old history, but I'm bringing you up to speed. There were laws, regulations, guidelines established for the CROs. It wasn't out of thin air, although sometimes we think it may have been. So there was a mutual agreement set up. Actually, it was signed in 2005. Again, we were created way before that doing some stuff, but this is actually when we got involved in the assets. It was in 2005. That allowed the official transfer of selected excess personal property from the site to the CRO. Bottom line is a lot of stuff we get from the site is 60, 50 years old or older. So it's not like we're getting all this great, good stuff coming to the CRO. A lot of the general public, a lot of people at the Savannah River site think we're getting all this wonderful stuff that the site has. Usually it's not that way. Actually, our sales, we went back and looked at 10 years, we're under 10 cents on the acquisition dollar of what we get when we sell stuff. So we sell stuff, we get basically, it's a yard sale, or it's on eBay. We get what somebody's willing to pay for it. So regardless of what the government paid for it 60 years ago, sometimes they think we're going to get that amount, but we don't get that amount. We get a lot less. We're constantly looking at ways to improve the process, and I'm going to bring you up to speed on 2 of those new ways. So number 1, I call that number 1, our original process. The site folks, when they get rid of a piece of equipment, they have to call it excess surplus. The old way is they would take it from wherever they are out in the field. All of you visited the site, you know, there's a lot of pine trees between one building and another building. So they got to take it from wherever they are into a laydown area to be picked up by us. And that was the normal process. So those outside program offices actually had to pay a fee to somebody internal to SRNS to be able to come and pick up the stuff and transport it. So they were spending a lot of times a lot of money. You know, we quoted spend $1 to take out a nickel's worth of trash. Sometimes that's the case. Some of you who are older remember the site used to do the auction site where you had all the stuff laid out, and well, people think, well, that was just done free. Well, no. It took a lot of money to organize it, to lay it out, to man it, to all that. This was in response to that. This is the next step that went to the next level. A little bit more on how we do it. We don't get it the first time it's surplus, okay? Initially, it's screened for surplus. All the other operational units at Savannah Riverside can say, oh, I'd like that 50-year-old pump, and then they get it. Or they take that 50-year-old pump and put it out on the internet, and Hanford said, oh, I've got a 50-year-old pump just like that 50-year-old pump. I'd like to have it over at Hanford. Then they can get it. After those two screenings, then the CRO goes through a screening process of being able to take that property off the site. During the first 30 days, we make that equipment available for folks to request it, mainly for job creation, but also we have something called quality of life. It's really for nonprofits to be able to ask for that piece of equipment. Now, as most people, well, it's free. Well, no, there ain't nothing free. My mom and daddy told me that, and I finally learned after 60 years, ain't nothing free. It cost us money to get that piece of equipment off the Savannah River site, so we have to tell the nonprofits and others we have a handling fee, transportation fees, things of that. So it's not a free giveaway of the equipment even when we list it during the 30 days. After the 30 days, we can sell it to the public. All right, this is our 30-day process. This is kind of the number of folks that have asked for it. Our main purpose for DOE was, well, we want y'all to do this to create jobs. Well, we only have had 17 companies really ask for a piece of equipment that would help them generate jobs. We've had 158 not-for-profits that asked for it. Now, you mainly think, well, that'd be cities and towns, and well, the majority of those actually are fire departments, rural fire departments. So it's interesting that a lot of the firemen that work at Savannah Riverside are also rural firemen wherever their home is. So a lot of times they know what's going to be surplus before we even know what's going to be surplus. So DOE was really interested in this number, and this goes you to show sometimes on the metrics how we can get caught up in metrics where it really doesn't matter. This number, this 859 number, was actually we had some excess furniture at the site that we set up for Bridgestone Firestone when they were building the second plant, okay? So when they fill out the forms, they said, well, there's 850-something people working at Bridgestone Firestone, so that furniture will actually create 850 jobs, okay? So this is kind of a fallacy in the way the system
Number two, we started doing something different, right? We know the site takes it from one place on the site, it takes it to the laydown area, we would have to take it from the laydown area, which is all in that. So we're going to do the money. We set up an economic development plan. We set up originally in 2014. We gave $1 million out. We gave $200,000 each to about 5 counties through the economic development organization to be used for economic development purposes. Some of them did estate buildings, others did other types of infrastructure work. That was what that money was used for. Then we also set up another pot of money at $50,000 per county per year for a total of $250 for a 5-year period. That's another $1 million. It has to be matched. In other words, they have to get $50,000 a year and have to match it with another $50,000. They can let it go for all under the 5-year
spaghetti on the wall, I guess. Expand used product assets. The site has a lot of cell phones. You may see a lot of them have 2 or 3 cell phones sometimes. Well, come to find out, the site may not be able to give those away or dispose of those because of some of the lithium batteries. We may be a venue that can sell those as product as opposed as waste. So that would be a way to use those products. Computers are another one. We've talked about maybe even helping out with direct warehouse operations, asset for assets. We're talking about maybe we could give assets back to the site. I don't think they're going to talk about the compelling place to work, but that's something the site's working on to attract the new workforce. So we're in conversations, nothing really concrete there. Excess facility reutilization. There's a lot of old buildings at the site. Can we go in, replace the roof, and let the Savannah River site folks use those buildings? And then we're always kind of contemplating land transfers. Is there a way to use some of the land at the site for private ventures? Now I'm going to switch to workforce. This is a tagline we've always had, growing our own through collaboration. And our nuclear workforce does a lot of different things. These are the primary activities. I'm going to talk to you mainly about the answer and work grants. Some of you have heard the answer grant, and I'll give you an update on the work grant. We're heavily involved in Nuclear Science Week, and that's something the CAB, I think, meant last time I was here, challenged y'all to get more involved in it. And there's a lot of activities, a lot of events that I think the CAB could get involved in. STEM Career Connections events, we're looking beyond nuclear now. We're looking at manufacturing, cyber, and also healthcare in the region. We host different types of HR meetings, mainly with the site folks. And then we do teacher workshops. Mindy Metz, who runs our Nuclear Workforce Initiative, was just at the TREAT workshop, which somebody mentioned. So what do? We're kind of the rubber band. You know, we're here and here holding these groups or helping these groups. I kind of like to say we don't create the dots, we help connect the dots. So that's my new tagline. Hope to get a new slide out there for that one. But okay, we work closely with these education partners. These are the ones mainly on our board or within our region, the 5-county region: Aiken Tech, Augusta University, USC Aiken, and USC Salkehatchie. We mainly started working with them on this grant we got from DOE, Advanced Nuclear Skills Regionally. If you read that acronym, that's the answer. And it was almost a $5 million grant over 5 years. These were programs that were set up at each one of those partners. And it took us a while to get the program set up, but we were able to get them set up and started folks running through the program. So this is the answer grant. Again, we said about $5 million. The colleges also invested about $4.6 million. We created 5 new degree programs. There were 821 college student enrollment through those programs. 217, you can see that, 159 answer graduates, and what we're most proud of is this one. Actually, 90% of those folks that were involved in the answer program actually found a job at the end of the period. Now, we said, well, that's great. What do we do with all these programs we set up? Wish Jack was here. We'll give Thomas the kudos and attaboys, but Jack was really involved in it, as well as Doug Deardoff. We said, what are we going to do when all these folks start retiring from the site, and we've got all these 25 to 35 folks, year folks needing jobs, or you have openings for folks. So we looked at something called workforce, workforce opportunities and regional careers. We called it WORK. And again, it was mainly the 5 colleges we worked with in the past. We were the program manager and the physical agent. We looked at initially 22 relevant degree programs. So remember those 4 or 5 that I show you? We expanded that to include accounting, other sciences, business majors, that type of programs. It was really set up really for these types of things was with scholarships, marketing and recruitment, and student retention strategies. And again, we got it both from DOE EM and NNSA for those programs. So again, we originally set it up for 150 scholarships annually is what we were looking at. Student retention was supposed to help folks understand the programs, how you get into nuclear, what does it mean. We have to market to these folks. You have to market to the younger folks. They don't know you have the program, how do they know to go into it? So marketing was a heavy part of the grant. And then the 2+2 engineering program is something that's really between Salkehatchie and USC-Aiken. USC-Aiken, some of you may or may not know, has started a 4-year engineering degree right in Aiken, so they do not have to go to USC in Columbia. And so what we did is actually USC Salkehatchie and USC Aiken decided you could go to Salkehatchie for 2 years, transfer to Aiken, and continue your engineering and get your engineering degree there. Mentioned some of this. This is a huge part, and maybe Carol will probably maybe talk about this, but we were anticipating 20 to 25 internships. We call them work experiences. Had not been done a lot. Well, the site has done a lot of interns, but a lot of the interns were not necessarily from the local area. There were a few. We were trying to get more of those local students into the work experiences of the site. Now, what was somewhat unique, they've tried it in the past that hadn't been done recently, is what about those 2-year college degree? Where is the internships for the maintenance person, the E&I technician? So what we did was try to infuse that into the work experiences to get those folks more experience working from the site, which ultimately would lead towards SRS careers. So to date, we did better than we thought. We got 218 scholarships, again in 22 relevant programs. The scholarships award range from $500 to $3,000, and it depends upon which school you're in, which program you're in. That's why the difference in the dollar value. We had over 53 students selected for internships and interviews. Those were local students going to those local colleges. New internships, I meant to line into long-term workforce needs, and we did new promotional strategies. Sometimes you may end up seeing a billboard or something like that near the schools. So we like to say it's real impacts, real people, real jobs. And this is a young lady. We had several of these. I just picked this one out. This is her story. And kind of the extra note at the bottom is really what the grant meant to her. And basically she's saying she needed one final class in the summer of 2017. She was planning to sell her car to get the tuition. So the grant was allowed her to get the tuition through the grant program, and she didn't have to sell her car to do that. So it's really impacting real people. It's not just numbers that you see on the screen. All right, so here's the teaser of, don't go out of the room, Miss Reporter. This is draft. It's not out for, wait till the final comes out. But I don't think the numbers will change, but don't go reporting that, oh, these numbers are factual. I mean, they're factual, but they're not quite ripe yet. In 2016, the average salary of the workers, this was everybody at the site, was right at $87,000. All right, and remember I said we're a 5-county area, so we mainly focused on our 5 counties. So when you do that, the average worker is slightly higher than that number for those in the 5-county area. So we're looking at almost $88,000 a year is the average salary for those folks that reside in the 5-county area that work at Savannah Riverside. You add the fringe benefits and the total, you can see what the total compensation would be. This report will go into how we got those numbers, where they came from, so hold your questions until after the final report comes in, because I won't be able to answer them. All right, this was a key one. We didn't really, this by comparison, the average earnings outside of the site were $52,000. So that gives you an idea of why, for the most part, a lot of people want to work at the site and are willing to work at the site is because of that salary increase. I was surprised because I thought with the more younger workforce coming in, that number may have decreased from last time. Last time we did this 6 years ago, 5 years ago, the average salary was $83,000. But Ms. Berry may can attest to this. Evidently, the young people the site's hiring are making a lot more money than I did when I got out of college, so that salary has actually floated up even though we may be getting new workforce coming in. Per capita, this is an interesting number that we're trying to tell folks in the community, every one of you that live in or in the 5-county area, the site means to you is $2,600 per person per year. All right, to you individually. That's what the economists project that the site means to you. And we also looked at something different this year. This says job loss, but it's actually a job loss or job gain. What does it mean if the site loses 1,000 people? What does it mean if the site gains 1,000 people? Y'all deal with, well, we don't want this mission. Psh, cut it out. Well, there's people behind that mission. What does it mean? What does it mean to the economy? What does it mean to the workers at the site? So this is something that we put in there this time to show folks what it does mean, an impact of the actual workers. We also looked at what happens to the transition. We're talking about the workforce retiring. So we're looking at a transition, 25 to 35-year-olds coming in to replace those jobs. So we actually did some scenarios on those, and those are in our report as well. So here's the workforce distribution for just the 5 counties. So remember, the site actually fingers go out Lexington to, you name it, Burke County to Screven County, to people come into the site to work. This is only the workforce related to Savannah River site in the 5-county area. So I don't know if you can read that number, but that's 53% of the folks in the 5-county area that work at Savannah River site. 53% of those live in Aiken County. All right, 1% in Allendale, 6 in Barmore, 15 and 12 in Columbia and Richmond County. So you may go back to the original slide. Why is Georgia part of the community reuse organization? Well, 1/3 of the workforce lives on the Georgia side of the river, and they travel over here. One thing in this slide, you need to go back and remember, workforce knows no geographic boundary. They don't know political boundaries. They don't know if they live in Columbia County, they're not supposed to work at Savannah Riverside, or somebody lives in Aiken or North Augusta is not supposed to work in Augusta. So this is a distribution of the workforce for those 5-county areas. And here's the impact that the site, as one of the info commercial slides that they came up with the end. The site is roughly, y'all have heard $2 billion, about $1.9 billion coming into the site. The direct expenses within the 5-county area of that 1.9 is 1.2 billion. All right, so 1.2 billion is spent in the 5-county area. And out of that, then we get into these other numbers. That means there's a $2.4 billion output in the 5-county area just from the Savannah River site. Personal income is 1.4 billion. Total jobs, not just the Savannah River site jobs, but the directs and the indirect jobs equate to over 1,800, almost 19,000 jobs totally created because of the Savannah River site. And what does that mean in local taxes? You've heard of payment in lieu of taxes. Hopefully that continues. Federal state taxes, they're paying $389 million in local taxes to the site. Again, job loss, but actually you'll see in the final report that is actually a job addition or a loss. We're looking at over $200 million in total effect of 1,000 people. Now again, if we lose 1,000 people, let's just say if MOX goes away, that's roughly 1,000 people. You're going to, if there's not a replacement or not other jobs coming in, you're looking at a $2 million impact of the loss of a MOX facility. So you can kind of scale that. They told me if it's 500 people, then you can take half that number. Also, if you look, this number, somebody said, well, that's not 1,000. Well, that's right, because we said before, not all of 1,000 live in the 5-county area. So this is just an impact to the 5-county area. They did some assumptions and came out to the 813 numbers. And I think that is it.
So we have time for a couple of questions. We're going to keep them brief so that we can keep going. I will say that Rick is never shy about answering questions via email too. So if we don't get to you today, send them our way and we'll be sure to get an answer for you. So with that, Nina, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Nina Spinelli, CAB. Have y'all thought about adding Allendale to your SRS reuse organization, since You have
Well,
U.S.
Allendale
psychiatry?
is part of the CRO.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we have Bill Robinson is Allendale County Council member. Well, was with the Economic Development Group. Ann Rice is on the Allendale County Council. So yes, we have at least 2 to 3 members from Allendale on the CRO already.
Thank you.
And Gil?
Rick, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Can you give an idea? I know I've heard a little bit about the work program with Aiken Tech. The new president's been pretty vocal about their involvement. Could you know anything about the program, the 2-year program they have going on there?
Well, when you say the work is the overall grant that supports programs at Aiken Technical College. Now, Carol Mike can talk to you about they've started recently a nuclear fundamentals course, and that may be what you're talking about, where the site was saying we need some operators at the site because our operators are retiring. They set up a program at Aiken Tech, about less than a dozen, I think, on it. About 8 to 10 folks went through the nuclear fundamentals as a precursor for the training for the operator program.
Okay.
But then you also have the Rad Tech program at Aiken Tech. You have other nuclear programs, so it's not all under one umbrella.
Okay. And so I know we kind of hit that at the end, but so I know MOX isn't under our scope, but let's just talk about the jobs. So 1,000 jobs, according to your study, means it's going to be an impact to the CSRA of $200 million?
Right. Well, we use 5 county, not the CSRA, because
I apologize. The 5
that's
county.
fine. I'm just, in legal terms, not legal, but most people, the CSRA encompasses larger area than our 5 county area.
So, I mean, it's going to be an economic hit to our 5 counties.
Correct. Either that or even 500 jobs.
Okay.
You know, a loss or a gain means a lot when you're talking about hundreds. And for most people, surely y'all understand the site usually doesn't hire, they may lay off 1 or 2. You don't hear about the 1 or 2s. You hear about the 2 or 3, 400s, right? That's what hits the paper. But we've been complacent, the community has. And what does 100 or 200 people mean from the Savannah River site? They got 11,000 people. They probably miss 200 every day. They don't know where they are. Not just kidding. But but it's important that the site the community loses focus. 200, 500 people are major manufacturing establishments. MTU has how many in their facility? 250. You're talking about 250 gone from Savannah Riverside. We don't blink an eye. MTU disappears. Everybody would say, well, why did MTU disappear? But because we've got 11,000, 12,000, we think they're just disposable, and they're not.
And does the CRO pay any attention to the pension issue or anything going on?
We pay attention to everything.
Do you have any, so what's your thoughts on the pension?
We have been in discussions that the pension, hopefully y'all know, I know Tom French knows,
Yes, he does.
when its payment comes out, it comes out of the operating dollars of Savannah Riverside. So Mr. Pope's tank cleanup that is funded, if the pension dollars are still in the mission dollars, we got to find some way to clean up tanks because the pension dollars go over there to pay pensions out of the dollars that are appropriated to clean up tanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you very much, Rick.
You're welcome.
And as I said, if we didn't get to your question, please email it to me. We'll pass it on. He's never shy about responding. With that, I think what we'll do next is we're going to go into the recruitment and retention presentations. I want you to note that we have 3 presenters lined up, one from DOE, one from SRS, and one from SRR. I'm going to ask that if you have any questions during any of those 3, that you just jot them down, make a note, remind yourself what they're going to be, because we're going to go through all 3 presentations, and then we'll do a brief Q&A session afterwards. Everybody okay with that? All right. Mr. Moody, kick it.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Moody. I'm with the Savannah River Human Resource Advisory Office. I'm here today to give you an overview of our demographics and stats for DOE Savannah River for the federal employees. All right, so demographics-wise, from our last year brief, just want to let you know, we went from having an FTE ceiling of 298 down to 275 for FY17, and currently on board, when I did this presentation, we're at 250 people. This is our breakdown of series and demographics of what we have of our major occupational and job series located at Savannah River. As you can see, we concentrate heavily on our general engineering, nuclear engineering, and physical science folks for our largest population of job series at Savannah River. So demographics, when we did the FY17 late last year demographics findings, we came up with several key findings. 69% of our SR employees are 50 years and older. And you'll see a graphic here to show that, compared to 13% under 40 years of age. Comparing results to the federal government and DOE, Savannah River has the highest concentration of employees in the 50 to 59 years of age range. 52% of the SR workforce have 20 or more years of service, making it a highly experienced workforce. In comparison, 40% of DOE employees and 38% of federal employees have 20 or more years of service. So we do have a highly qualified workforce with a lot of experience. 46% of the SR workforce is at the GS-14 level and above, meaning that we have some high-level senior personnel, SMEs, and people that know what they're doing for the site. 27% of SR population are currently eligible for retirement, so disregard at 23. It's 27% of the SR population are currently eligible for regular retirement. In addition, 20% are eligible for early retirement with the VEER authorization in fiscal year 2017, which just ran out, and we're not sure we're going to get that authorization back. So, which gives up a total of 47% that's eligible for retirement, if you add those two together. And what VEER is the Volunteer Early Retirement Authority that is granted to by the OPM and OMB to agencies to let people retire without having to meet all the requirements. So this chart here shows the demographics. As I was saying earlier, between 50 and 59 is 50%, and then 60 and over, we're at 19%, which gives us a total of 69% of our people that's of age and range, and then 13% under 40 years of age. Retirement, as I was going over retirement, as I said, right now today, for regular and early retirement, we have 118 people eligible out of 250 folks eligible to retire if they want to today. Within the next 5 years, you will add that number. If those 118 doesn't retire, then you add another 28 people to that number, gives a total of 146. So within the next 5 years, we'll have a total of 146 people eligible to retire using the regular and early retirement benefits. Other demographics we have here, employee eligible, we kind of make use of this chart a lot to track where our people are eligible and what occupation field to help us with our succession planning and our recruitment efforts, to know where we're losing that skill and talent, knowledge management of people, so we can bring in people behind that and hopefully have a knowledge transfer based process to give those individuals time to understand the Savannah River site. SR losses and gains over the last couple of years, we started keeping this in 2007, but in the last 3 years, we have 89 losses and within that time, gains 71. As I mentioned earlier, our FTE ceiling went from 298 to 250. Also, we look in taking account of our technical qualification program. We're keeping track of that as well, because those are the individuals qualified to look at major technical and engineering type work that's going on to ensure that work is being done properly and monitored. Our SR attrition rate, we've been average over annual SR attrition rate at 9.6%, which equates to about 20 employees per year, and we definitely taking consideration for that. As you can see, for SR, we haven't offered the VEER VSIP, or the VSIP option since 2011, 2012. And VSIP is the Volunteer Separation Incentive Program, and most people hear that in the news about the buyout. So at this time, we have no information on what DOE Savannah River or EM folks are willing to do with the buyout if we decide to have one. Challenge for SR of the occupation series and SR budget analysts and 560 and program analysts 340, each represent the highest percentage of employees at age 50 and older at 100%. So that would be these here budget analysts and program analysts. We look at the age and also the years of service to understand, once again, to have a good succession plan to make sure we have a backfill and bring in people that can qualify for those positions prior to people retiring. Mission Critical Occupation Series, we take this very seriously. Every year, this is part of our senior management team strategy plan. We look at what OPM is considered mission critical occupation, DOE headquarters, down to Savannah River. So with the Savannah River, we look at the general engineer, physical scientists, facility reps. We look at them being a critical occupation for us, the fire protection engineers, and also the 840 series, which deals with nuclear engineering, nuke safety, and facility engineers as well. These are the different occupation series we definitely concentrate on when we meet twice a month to determine how we want to fill those positions. Human resource challenges that we have for this year, no secret to the panel members here. Due to the presidential memorandum regarding the hiring freeze and workforce reshaping, all EM sites were under a temporary hiring pause, which really most of the federal government was under a temporary hiring pause. Must attain overall approval from Secretary of Energy, and recruitment positions had to be related to national security and public safety responsibilities. I will tell you this did hamper our recruitment efforts throughout the year. This was implemented in January, late January, and just recently we was able to get some approvals for hiring, which we will be bringing on a lot of general engineer and nuclear engineer folks within the next 2-3 months. Aging workforce, average age at our site for federal employees are 53. Over age of 50, we said earlier, 68, 69%. Retirement eligible with VEER is 47%. Things we're working on is knowledge transfer. Due to the low amount of people we have and looking at succession planning, knowing how to transfer that knowledge over to before and prior to an employee we decided to retire. There's a different strategy we're using for that, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Also, utilizing recruitment tools and programs to attract young talent. We're looking at different incentives, but most of our incentives require budget, and of course, our budget is always under scrutiny every year, and we always go into a continuing resolution. And training opportunities. We have to provide training opportunities as well to attract those young talents, and also look at cross-training of our individuals that we have there. One of the things that our senior management team, along with myself and my office, working at is looking at cross-training of individuals that's already been there on site, giving them other details or avenues to learn things and help out where we have a shortage of resources. Strategies, recruitment and retention strategies, utilize incentive programs to recruit and retain mission critical occupation, continue to recruit under career pathways program, recent grads. Due to the changing of our FTE ceiling from going from 298 to 275, we wasn't able to recruit in the recent grads for this year, but we already talked to headquarters, and we're looking at recruiting recent grads and looking at probably about 10 or 12 of those for the site for next year. Also utilizing support service contractors when possible, when we have a shortage in those critical areas as well. Create and implement an aggressive succession plan, conduct annual career reviews with employees to gauge and when they're thinking about retiring, and also providing retirement services, giving them the information and stuff they need to make a decision about retiring, so that way we'll know when we can recruit an individual to come in. Unfortunately, we're not able to always know when someone decides to retire, or how to bring in a new employee prior to them retiring to have that turnover time period, whether it's just a month time period or 6 months time period. Anticipate future gaps in critical areas and be proactive in recruiting. Some of the things we're doing in knowledge transfer and training opportunities, we continue to increase what we call brown bag training opportunities, where we have SMEs go out during lunchtime or during the day and teach and report on their areas of expertise. be able to show what they know in their SME areas, and also be able to provide history on the different areas of what they worked in, whether it's H area, air area, and so forth. And also what we did, we improved knowledge transfer by videotaping some of the SMEs when they're doing these brown bag specials or trainings. We continue to work with what we call National Training Center, NTC, to procure more training courses on site to reduce the cost of travel. We did that last year. We brought in probably a record of about 20 different NTC courses, and we're doing that this year. And we're going to continue to work with them to bring on courses. Of course, when you hire new folks into DOE, they have to learn the orders and manuals, but also we need to provide them the training as well. Questions and comments will be held after the next two presenters. Thank you.
All righty. Good afternoon. So in my presentation today, I spoke with you last year. I'm hoping to build on what I think is a very good news story from SRNS. And what I'll be going through is what we tell the story, and it's in 6 steps of how we perceive this challenge that we have to build the workforce. And we see that challenge not as something in the future, it's something we're addressing today. And then I'll give you some data and some statistics. So the first part of the story is really preparing that pipeline. You've got to start early, you've got to have the funding and forge the partnerships necessary so that people understand the opportunities out there. And through the Education Outreach Department, in the past 2 years, we've reached over 30,000 students and teachers. Additionally, one of the things I believe that has driven a lot of our success is to increase the number of interns that we have. And yes, we worked with Rick's group with the Crow, and we exceeded the goal that we set in hiring. So, excuse me. So we had in 14 an increase from then of 35% number of internships. This summer, we had 147 interns from 51 schools across the United States, including Puerto Rico. So we've done very well there. And 28% of those interns since 14 we've been able to hire into full service positions. And this has served us well because we provide very good opportunities for these interns so that they can go back to their schools and talk to their fellow classmates and tell them how good it is to work here. We just had our reception last week for our interns who are leaving their employment, and they're so excited, and some of them are sophomores. They're looking forward to coming back next year. So that's been a real increase for us. We're hoping to increase that number. I have a personal goal for next year that I've told Stuart. So that's a fun challenge, and it's something that's really borne fruit for us. And again, we forge partnerships with our local colleges and universities. I agree with the comment earlier. This need to outreach and help people to understand that these 2-year technical degrees are important is something we've got to get that word out. We did start the nuclear operations program in conjunction with Aiken Tech, but they've not been able to fill the classes. You know, their class size, they can take up to 30 students, and the most they've ever had is 16. So somehow we've got to get that word out to the high schools. And so we're partnering now with the Aiken County Schools, that Aiken Works program they have going on now, to help get that word out. I see that as a shift. You know, in my generation, you had to get a 4-year degree to be successful. We certainly have a lot of positions where we need folks that get those 2-year certifications. So we're working with that. And again, we provide funding to the higher education institutions at a high level so that they can develop the programs that we need. The next, you got to spread the word and you have to target the talent. I mentioned last year we're still using that predictive attrition tool. We have a consulting company called Buck Consultants who's worked with us for a number of years, so they understand the behavior of our workforce in making decisions to retire and or to leave the company. I find it it's hard to tell people, you know, the total number of people that are retirement eligible. People think you have this super urgency today, and people make their retirement decisions in a lot of different ways. And so we're trying to take a look at that because it gives you a more realistic view. So we've got that charted out 5 years. And what that helps us do is target our recruitment efforts, and it also helps us to understand where we have the needs, because we look at it by skill category. What's that insertion time? Meaning, what's that training time? It's one thing to hire people, but in certain positions, it takes time to get the specific training they need on site so that they can be 100% viable to us. So that has to get us building that pipeline so we bring them in at the appropriate time. And also we set targets for our hiring. We have minority serving institutions that we go to frequently, veterans programs, and also targeting specific skill areas, fire protection engineers, occupational safety and health, and engineering. So we went to, this year, 26 college and university career fairs in 11 states. The next thing that's important is to try to bring them in smoothly. That's sometimes a challenge. But one of the things we did, we used to have our own tests that we had to develop, and that was hard to keep up with those. So we went to the ACT work keys, and those are administered in the high schools now and in the tech school. And what we've done is partnered with the high schools and the technical schools to help them to understand which particular inventories we require and what score we're looking for. Because that helps them to understand. It's great if they administer that test to their students and understand what our requirements are, and then they're coming to us and they've already had that test. We've finished using that and certifying that for all but 2 of our non-exempt job categories, and we should be finished by this fiscal year. And that's really helped us to bring folks in more rapidly. We also, just very recently, implemented an interactive total compensation tool. And what that is, and I have a 1-page example, when we send an offer to an employee, we include a very interactive tool where you can put in what you would choose in your health and welfare benefits in terms of medical, vision, dental, and also you can put in where you would set your standard, what your percent of giving would be in your 401k, and then it calculates for you what your total comp is. So it takes into account what your offer is and gives you that answer. We just started that in June. You know, it's every little thing you can do to help people, to coax them to come work with you. And we've already seen a 3% increase in the number of engineering acceptances since we did that. And in certain other skill areas, we've had people tell us that tool was the difference maker in accepting our offer over other offers they had. So again, it's understanding your issue and responding to it. It's big and small changes. A big thing we started, we have a focused improvement transformation process. We call it the FIT process in SRS, and it utilizes the simpler tools to take a look at processes and try to streamline them and be more effective. We did this in human resources in 2016, and we were basically just looking at how to improve our new employee hiring process. So right now, we've already improved that significantly. We've reduced the time from 110 days, sadly. Back in 14, it was the first year we really started hiring. And now we're at 56. Well, it was 56 when I did this slide. I just reported today we're down to 41. So we're trying to reduce that time frame. That makes a difference for people, getting back to them quickly and giving them the offer to hire. Our attrition for new hires was at 5.2%. We wanted to get that down. We know we can't get to 0, but how low can we get that? And we've already seen an improvement in FY17 down to 3.1%. And then satisfaction with our hiring process, we're measuring that, and we were at 68% last year, and we're up to 78%. And one of the things that we see that will help us to do a better job is we need to establish a single point of entry to the site. Currently, we have employees, they all have to have GET training, general employee training. That occurs in Jackson today. Then they go to A area for badging. Then they go out to central shops for medical, and then back to B area to HR. So my point is, have them all in one location. And we're working right now to see if we have a building on site that we can utilize to do that. And we've already reduced some of that by changes in processes. And what we're hoping that can do is we're reducing the time it takes to onboard an employee from 2 days to 1. and that's a significant cost savings for us. And next, then you inform, inspire, and reward them. So there's a few areas there. We offer a number of developmental opportunities. We have 2 leadership workshops that are offered through my department. One is called Transition to Leadership. People call it T2L for short. The other is Leadership 101, Leadership Development 101. So we constantly look at those workshops for content and improve them. And we've recently added ConOps and quality assurance information to those, which helped reduce training in other areas because we had them in that forum. And both the INPO and 2016 Safety Culture Report cited those workshops as strengths for SRNS. We also have 2 very active career development organizations. The LEAP, Leaders Emerging Among Professionals, are for our newer early career. And then our mid-career is the Aspiring Mid-Career Professionals. Great organizations. They have different programs throughout the year for development for their work, for that group. And it's a great opportunity for the executive team and other managers to interact with them, high degree of engagement, and they enjoy that. I think I do too. So we continue a program called Mentoring Circles. Mentoring Circles are where groups of employees meet with a member of the leadership team. It's a 12-month program. You meet monthly. You have about 12 participants, and each of them are responsible for what that monthly program is. I just finished mine recently, and I think we're probably going to have a bowling team. So I'm continuing engagement with that group, and so that's very helpful in folks understanding where they fit in and being a part of SRNS. The engineering group is very proactive on developing programs. They have an engineering leadership development program where they take all their newly hired engineers, they're each assigned a mentor, and they work in the different areas in SRNS. It's part of our knowledge transfer, and it helps them with their engineering qualification training, and they've been very successful with that program. In the area of compensation and benefits, 3 years ago we started providing the total compensation statements to all of our employees. We found that that was very useful for people to understand. It's not just the dollars that you have in your check, but what the value of the benefits we provide are. It's partly what caused us to develop that for the folks that we're trying to hire. That's been very successful. We also, last year, with a one-time approval from the Department of Energy in our salary program, were able to make significant market equity adjustments for our early career engineers and scientists. We had found that our attrition was gaining in that area, and we also were finding, we found a new survey that was available that gave us the data we needed to show where we had fallen behind. And we've seen a big improvement in our ability to retain individuals in that category as a result of those adjustments. It's made a big difference, and it took us from sliding down closer to the 90% in our, where we stood against the market, and we're closer to 98% now. Also this year, it's not on there, we implemented a Roth IRA type program as a part of our SIP plan, and the number of participants grows in that each month. We also have variable pay programs for specific skill areas that are difficult for us to retain, and that's worked out very well for us. And we evaluate those on an annual basis to see if they're still needed or need to be modified. And also last year in our non-exempt pay structure, for the first time we split that into 2 areas because we found by doing it just by grade as we had done previously, we were comparing individuals who, I like to call, they're moving fissile material to individuals who are doing administrative work in office buildings. And so we broke those out into our production and technical areas and administrative. And it wasn't an easy message for all of those, but it has been a positive impact because you're comparing like jobs when you do your salaries surveys. So then you see your results. So where are we? So since FY14, we've hired 1,721 employees. We're at about 35% of our workforce has been hired in that time. One of my goals, I told you this last year, is to hire from the local area. If they love this area and they live in this area, they'll probably stay in this area. And that helps increase retention. Last year in November, when we looked at these numbers, I had hired about 80% from the local area. We're up to 83%. So that's a goal that I have. I actually have a number in my head I'd like to get to, but it's helped us. It's been a positive thing to do, and that's our goal. Also, we've decreased our attrition. Focusing on that, looking just at the 9 retirement eligible people, we've decreased that by 15%, and we've stayed there. Also focusing on veteran hiring each year, that target has changed. This year, the target is set for us set by the Department of Labor. It's at 6.7%. We're at 11%, and I'm expecting that to climb by at least 2 or 3 percentage points before the end of the calendar year. That's what we're measured against. And also, our average age was 54 at the beginning of our contract in 2008, and now we're at age 49. And then to keep them here. So that's looking at our spaces at some of the compelling place to work initiatives and that focused employee engagement. So the first I mentioned, the focused improvement transformation. Those events are taking place across our company, and you have a number of people on those teams, and it gets a variety of people engaged in solving problems for the site. And that's engagement that is it's borne fruit for us. You get a lot of different ideas from people, and it's made a positive impact in all areas. I've seen it in my own. In workspaces, we've expanded conference areas, collaboration areas. We've improved some of the physical workspaces just by painting, changing out the carpet, making it feel like a better place to work. And we've done things in the badge office, again, one of the early places people see, by doing some of this carpet replacement, painting, making the furniture a little newer, putting better graphics on the wall. And as was mentioned, we continue to remove the unsightly and unneeded trailers, and it's at about, I think the number's at about 40. And then in services, as part of the compelling place to work, we're improving our food service. We have a number of food trucks that are available. Just rolled out, I think the announcement was today or yesterday, they've got a website where you can go and see what food truck's going to be where. The site cafeteria, so out at 766H, was recently, I think it was in June, we did the grand opening for the improvements that were made there, and a lot of positive response on the improvement of the quality of the food. And they'll soon begin able to provide catering services for lunchtime meetings that we have. So that's a positive improvement. We have improved number of exercise facilities. That's something that you see when you have your new generation coming in. They want access to that sort of thing. In addition to the gyms, we also have outside areas where you can do mountain biking and walking. We've had to increase our number of wellness rooms we have. We have 4 new ones in this past year, and we're working to implement a couple more where we don't have them. We're also right now, the construction's begun over in 730B for a new coffee-type cafe that'll feature Starbucks. It's exciting to see that. I think the buzz has already begun, and just creating a better atmosphere in which people can work and collaborate. And we have rapid charging stations for all the devices that we like to keep charged to use as we work. So where are my numbers? Where am I today? So these are June 30 numbers. I have new ones, but we'll stick with these as I go on through July. But I'm currently at 391 full-service employees hired. Average age of those new hires is 37. And I like to tell people, why is it 37? Because if you think about it, we didn't hire for 15 to 20 years. So there was a gap in our workforce. You didn't have those mid-career folks ready to take on management positions and or to fill SME positions. So that's why that number stays at around 36 or 37, and I think that will maintain for a while. So it's not just current college grads, new college grads we're hiring. We do hire individuals with experience for vacancies that we have. We have our acceptance rate. It averages around 90% when you look at the 2 different categories of positions, and that's been excellent. We always have people with a future report to work date, jobs in posting, And again, we did have the 147 interns this year, summer interns, but we do have a number of year-round interns in certain areas. And that's a great opportunity for individuals who are going to some of the local schools and then can work a part-time position in some of our areas. I know finance uses that. And then the number of people that have left the company in this fiscal year was 214, and that average age is 54. And we average around in the 70%, sometimes a little higher than 70% of the people that leave are leaving for retirement reasons. Our head count from last year to this year, you can see we're fairly stable. We're a little bit up. And the blue area is the exempt, non-exempt craft and staff aug population. So you can see over the last, we've remained fairly stable, slightly going up, and we're able to fill the jobs where we have the vacancies. We mapped this out, the number of full-service employees by generation and age. The age of our workforce varies from age 20 to age 77. So we have a very diverse span of age in our workforce. What's interesting to note to me on this slide is when you look at our peak, it is still primarily the baby boomer, but it's also that Gen X is climbing in terms of being part of that peak. But you can see here with our millennials, we're starting to grow that number also. So there's no silver bullet. There's no one single thing you can do. It's a process over time that gets you there. And I think that SRS has been able to see success by taking that approach. And then finally, every year we take a look at this, and that's again using the actual number of people that left along with the predicted attrition data that we have. We go ahead and forecast out the next 4 years. And as you can see, these are my actual numbers. We forecast this year we'd be at 400. I said we're at 391. And I know already I've gone through that 400 number. So I think we were a little conservative in our estimate. But we also did hire last month, actually June and July, a number of production operators and mechanics. And that was something necessary that we needed to do, taking a look at where we would need positions and then the time it takes to train once we hire them. So I think the total was around 55, some in EM Ops and some in Tritium. And that's, so I'll take questions after.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm David Holland. I'm with Savannah River Remediation, and I currently serve as the Admin Services Director for the operation. So we'll start. Just wanted to highlight a few pieces, a brief overview of SRR for your awareness and understanding. This particular chart here is an accounting of the head count since contract inception back in April of or quarter of 09. And you can see it's largely remained static with the exception of the little blip in quarter 4 2013 where there was a workforce reduction, but it rebounded quickly later with DOE providing additional funding for the contract in that period. But to note, just similarly to SRS, our headcounts have remained largely static where we're replacing attrition versus massive scale hiring for new mission or the scope. If you look at our staffing demographics, there's a couple of slides that I would point to. We are looking at the future of really Generation Z and Generation Y, which most of you have heard now is really going to be the largest component of the workforce in the next couple of years, if it's not already. There's something like 81 million millennials in the work cohort starting to come up. But in this particular element of the slide, if you look at the two bars are reflecting what we project will be the population at 5-year intervals. So today, if you look here, baby boomers are around 900 people, Generation X 413, Generation Y 276, and 0 in Generation Z. In the next 5 years, we assume, or we have a model that predicts about 480, 486, 454, and 617 accordingly. So what you start to see is that transition taking place with the workforce. Really, that's the culture change that we'll be dealing with, because I think those of you who have kids or grandkids, you know they learn differently than the way you learned. And I have some young children, and I notice it's not taught the same way that it was in years past. And the usage of computers and iPads overwhelms just everything you do, all the way down even into middle school and elementary school now. So the form of learning will be different for our individuals as they come into the workforce, and we have to adapt to that. Interestingly enough, traditionalists, we still, it's an interesting workforce in the fact that all age groups are represented, and I expect that to continue for as long as we can see as the workforce changes. This particular chart, we flipped it, and similar to SRS, it has the same type of curve because obviously this site's been here a long time, and it's a generational type chart. But what's interesting is people start to think about, hey, do you have attrition? Do you have problems with replacing the workforce? And what I tend to focus people on is really age 52 to age 58 is your highest age cohort. And so when you start to think about that on a granular level basis, it's like eating the elephant. You can take a bite at a time, and you can replace those individuals, train them, get them up to speed in a relatively direct and effective manner with the workforce. We know that increased turnover, younger generations are increasingly mobile, and so we'll have to compete not only for talent in the local area, but even against the eminent contract in that particular regard for mission work. There's three factors in terms of impact on recruitment for Savannah River remediation. One is the aging workforce. We just highlighted it. Societal factors are influencing workforce retention rates. As I look at data over the last couple of years, what I've noticed is the age curve is starting to flatten just ever so slightly a little bit older than what it was. So the days of people leaving at 58 and 27 years or 60 and 30 years, those are starting to ebb a little bit. Even those individuals who have subsidized retiree medical and defined benefits, that's starting to ebb, because as they look at the society around them and they're determining, how do I position myself best for a long lifespan of potentially another 25 years, what's it doing? It's driving people's curve out just a little bit further in terms of work scope. Retirement savings, of course, you got to project your future income and how you're going to position for that, and thus leads to the gradual flattening of the age curve. So that's pushing us to the right. Our ongoing generational shift at SRR, what is happening in the three groups, those people who've less than 5 years or 5 to 10 years, we are transitioning. The workforce is transitioning. On-the-job training is occurring. Development is occurring at the project level, at the business level, where individuals are ready to take on new assignments. When I thought about the previous slide right here, this age cohort, although we have people in key or critical positions in this operation, what's happening is we do have a band of people here who are being prepared for that particular position in there. So our needs will be replacing the earlier career type backfill candidates versus necessarily going for the person running the facility. So we have a nice gradual curve, a nice gradual path to attract and get people into the operation. The last is, in terms of new mission, salt waste processing facility, this is the only other thing that I see in the next couple of years that will cause us to increase our population than what it currently is today. So with an assumed planning of 9 million gallons per year of processing, we would add approximately 40 operational positions in the business with that as a potential. That remains to be seen as we continue to implement the scope of or tying in SWPF at that particular time. Our human resources strategic plan, our attrition management this year is 4.3%. We have 4.3% attrition. 60% of that, not unlike SRS, is retirements, and we would largely expect that. We anticipate about 175 retirements over the next 5 years. So you'll start to see that continued movement, and we will replace that with probably a mixture anywhere from about, in the exempt population, 35 to 45, and in the non-exempt population, I would guess around 25 to 35 in that particular grouping. Some of the focuses that we're doing with our individuals, of course, we're going through a contract competition, but we wanted to make sure our employees understood what the future was with them, what their goals and aspirations were. So we started refocusing on career discussions, getting people to talk about what do they want to do with their career, where do they want to go and the like. And then hiring ways, we are normal attrition, critical skill replacement. That is what we're doing in this particular operation at SRR. You can see our critical non-exempt jobs where we focus. In 2016, 2017, blue represents 17. You can see we approximately added 30 in the production operators, E&I mechanics, RadCon inspectors, a slightly lower number for the last 2 years. But we're starting to replace that attrition that's out there or the future retirements that we're anticipating. And we are looking in advance. So we have an estimate of those individuals who are going to retire. We have an understanding of what their career plans may be. And so we're positioning hiring. And in fact, not represented on this chart, we're starting on another hiring campaign in the summer of 2017 where we have a number of positions that have been opened and we're sourcing from the local community. Hiring age stats, you can see the reflection of the age is changing. Year-to-date 17, 32 age 32, so the age is dropping in that particular regard, so it leads to a long lifespan in the contract. And in the exempt population, again, the age is in the 40s and 30s in that particular grouping. We wanted to focus on our participation in the county and the surrounding area. And as you can see, Aiken County is, again, the lion's share of the population, with Columbia and Richmond counties being the second and third most populous counties in reflection. I think this is an interesting chart. Engineering hires and resignations. We live, and what's critical to our particular mission is having the appropriate funding. So when we don't have funding, I think it impacts our ability to retain young engineers or young professionals for that matter. But this is a snapshot of our engineering hires and resignations over the period of time. And what I'd like to point out is the success that the engineering team in SRR has had since about the 2014 timeframe of retaining individuals, getting them to be accentuated to the local market. Many of them are from the local area, but many are not. So, you know, people from Wisconsin, people are from Texas, people are from other areas where they make this area their home and they want to stay. But when you have a workforce reduction in the 2013 timeframe, what happens? All the younger people or younger career people get scared. They get a little bit nervous. Hey, is this the life that I'm going to live for the next 5 years? I burn up all my paid time off. I have to have money set aside. I think I'll go somewhere else. So it is absolutely critical that funding remains constant where the management team can address those budget shortfalls in a given year. But you can see the activity that we've had, and we've quelled the resignations of engineers that are vital for the operation. You can see a little bit more focus on attrition statistics for the year. Retirement, of course, is the lion's share, and I don't see that abating for the next 3 to 5 years. Our focus in continuing to hire, we focus regionally. We focus on universities that you know and love in the particular area, as well as HBCUs and other targeted schools to help us build our pipeline of students. In 2017, we are in the midst of our summer internship program. We had 27 individuals come in this particular year. In fact, I was in a report out session yesterday where they were talking about some of the missions and some of the projects that these individuals did. And it was, many of them were pretty excited about, they actually did real physical work out in the facility, helping the facility understand something a little bit further. So a good use of their time, a good chance for them to learn and go back to their schools and express that sentiment. We also participate in the local career fairs with veterans and the like, but again, we focus on this area because we largely believe this is the greatest chance, greatest likelihood that individuals will stay. Summary, we're experiencing success with our HR strategic plan and the engineering recruiting process. It still poses a challenge. Recruiting people to Savannah Riverside is a challenge for us in that particular operation, so we have to work very diligently to attract and recruit individuals. future flexibility and work scheduling, phased retirement, and the like. Those will be the focal points, I think, over the next couple of years to position individuals, especially when you think about people in their 50s or early 60s who may not necessarily want to come in every day, but want to still remain active at work. So we'll look at opportunities of how to capitalize on that. Execution of the federal budget is absolutely critical, and we need to level out the funding impacts as we have them in order to retain our workforce in that particular regard. And that is it. Thank you.
All right, so let's get Lee and Carol back up here with Dave, and let's see what questions you guys have for them. Mr. Howard, you were the first one out the gate. Let's start with you.
Doug Howard, Cap. I think we all know that our current military has problems with retention of highly qualified automators and cybersecurity folks. So how do you all compete with the civilian sector as far as retaining your folks?
Can you hear me? Okay, yes, for Savannah River, for the federal staff, what we do, we have an aggressive IT program, and we hired more. Matter of fact, about 2 years ago, we created a bigger IT department, and we went out to some of the military bases, to different sites, and post our jobs on USA Jobs to hire some of our IT folks. And right now, we're staffed with our correct numbers for IT folks. And how we maintain them is some of the initiatives that Carol talked about, compelling workplaces, some of the different processes that we put in place with OPM and OMB. For instance, it's definitely hard to hire IT folks, even the ones that just graduated 2 or 3 years ago, based on the pay scale we bring them into. So OPM created a special pay scale for our IT folks as well, to not just come into the basic pay scale of a regular GS11, step 1 or 2. We created an initiative and built in incentives to bring those IT folks into our fold, into our workplace. Also, what we have created too is to keep them abreast, providing them updated training, because the IT, cybersecurity, career fields changing every day. So we try to provide them with the updated training and sending them off to courses that will cost them, or certification that will cost them outside in their pocket. We was able to pay for those and bring those courses to our site. So those are some of the initiatives that we've done at Savannah River for the federal staff to maintain those IT folks.
Now, is this Doug Howard, Cap, is this the same with your other critical jobs, such as your engineers and your other critical personnel?
Yes, we try to do that as well. It depending on what certification or license, professional license they would like to get. We do reimburse or pay for any exams or license that they would like to take and have in their professional, personal careers. But for the IT, it's very important for them so they can stay abreast and stay up on the new updated challenges that face cybersecurity and IT.
Okay, I'll speak to IT first, but then we've just recently had what we think is going to be a big success in terms of the hiring and retention of some veterans in some other positions. In the IT area, that's one of the areas where we also looked at what were our hiring rates, because we were having problems getting people to accept the offers because it is so competitive. We made adjustments, and we've seen a big increase with that. That's also an area where we target our intern program and have had great success with that, because there are unique challenges to the work that we have, and that's what interests people. That's what they like to do. And that's also an area where we have one of our variable pay programs. So it takes a lot in that IT area because the competition is strong in general, but in our area, it's only increased. Now, in terms of veterans in general, we had some challenges in our area in Tritium to hire in certain, not early career. We've done that in hiring production operators, but it's more that mid-career, your first line managers and your SOM positions. And so we had a recent event where that team, along with Human Resources, went to 4 different naval facilities, and then we had a 2-day event. And what we found is we had over 20 people come to that, and they didn't realize what we offered. They didn't know what the area looked like. And so, I'm real positive about what everybody wants to consider this problem, because I find when we hire people, they're like, well, don't talk about us. You got us. We're not a problem. So you have to be real positive in what you've got to offer. And so what we did was a 2-day event. And the first day, our public relations folks have great tours. You've probably been on them. So we did a tour across the site, and we also then hosted all of these individuals at the museum that we have for the site. And that just helped acquaint them with the rich history that we have, and they want to continue their service as civilians. And so then the next day we had very focused interviews for the positions we have available. I can't wait to be able to report on that, but I'm expecting that to be a huge success. And it was a big lessons learned for us. We have a lot to offer for people. We have wonderful, very diverse communities for people to choose to live in. And so that's something we did in a very targeted way. So.
My final question is, you said that your attrition rate for your new hires was, you got it down to 3.1%?
Yes.
Okay, how much of a problem or your attrition comes from clearance problems?
Well, that really wasn't the lion's share of the problem. Most problem when those folks in the first year, it's one of two things. They either realize working at the site really wasn't for them, they didn't understand what it involved, and part of that is obtaining a clearance. For those, and that's a lesson for us, so we're making sure that's a part of when we go out and recruit, that they understand. We have some things that we're working to put in place. Predominantly, the reason is they want to move closer to home. So, but relative to the clearance problems, we have worked very hard this year to have processes in place to reduce, hopefully as close as possible, eliminate that being an issue when people get to site. So we've increased our screening as much as we can so that we can eliminate that as a problem.
Thank you.
Your mic.
Okay. I do want to answer with the Savannah River remediation contract, we have a rather small IT function. So not unlike what SRS is doing, we focus on recruiting individuals who are familiar with the area or word of mouth and that particular element. Secondly, I would also add kind of the holistic whole program of health and welfare and retirement benefits really are a very positive attractant for people who come in this particular profession. What we do find with a number of the IT professionals, they've lived the life of a consulting gypsy, if you will, and so many of them want to get off the road, want to position and seed themselves, and so that has been reasonably successful for our particular operation in that regard. And also that's where clearances, just for awareness, understanding SRR has a very limited use of clearances in its operation, so that has not been an issue of maintaining employment in that regard.
I'm going to ask real quick that if you do have a question, if it is general and you want everyone to answer it, please feel free. If you have one that's specific towards an individual or their organization, please make sure that your question is phrased in that specific way, okay? Next, David, you had yours up.
David Vargas, CAB. Would you be able to pull up slide 7 from the DOE presentation, please? And in the meantime, for SRR and SRNS, in terms of the number of days each year per employee, how much do you invest in employee training?
Training or development? Because that's two different things. And I don't know that I have a days per year. I'd have to get somebody to do that for me, and it would depend on functions also. It would vary from a production operator all the way to an engineering new hire, but we can get you that data.
Well, how about your people in the field? How much training do they receive each year?
Hands-on workers, production operators, right, mechanics, they receive a number of days. They have, we have site-specific training that they're required to take and also facility-specific. So it's something we've been talking about recently. We're trying to take a look at that. Can we reduce that number so that we can engage them in work immediately? But there are requirements, and it does vary by facility.
The answer is consistent. I don't have a direct number, but there is site training as well as facility-specific training. And in many cases, in fact, even ourselves right now, we're looking at adding additional resources on shift to provide support for training. So we can get you that number.
Okay. And on slide number 7, I was, for DOE, please, I was wondering, why are you falling so far below your authorized level with workforce each year?
Yes, great question. Of course, every year we go through a CR and we wait for our budget, and then our budget determines our FTE ceiling. So once we get our budget and FTE ceiling late last year, going from 298 to 275, based on recruitment and budget constraints, we didn't know what that number was going to be, so then it hampered our efforts. Also, starting in January, when the hiring freeze went into effect, basically we wasn't able to hire anyone from January up to the end of June, and then we had to go through numerous steps that I won't explain here, but to request exemption to hire in those critical areas that I was talking about, where it had to be national security or safety. And during that time, too, that was another hamper, was that we had to wait till Secretary Perry get confirmed, because he was the only one that could authorize or approve those hiring as well. And so it was a long wait and demand for us, but management was engaged, and we sent emails, and we follow our human capital office from Epic headquarters to determine when we was able to get those hires. But just recently, and then once we got those permissions or approvals, then we had to go out and post those jobs through USA Jobs, as we always did.
So these are FTEs, full-time equivalents, not FTPs?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Joyce? I had one more question, if I could, please. And what is the DOE attrition rate annually?
We average about 9.4% annually, and that equates to about 18 to 20 people per year.
Okay.
Joyce Underwood, CAB. All three of you mentioned that you have college internships. Are those paid?
They are paid.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah,
That's all I
that's
know.
Gil Allensworth, CAB. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it. I had a question. Lee, SRR and SRNS both said they forecast retirements, and you said that y'all have had some issues. Why can't y'all forecast retirements like them?
Well, we do forecast our retirements. We have a number that we do forecast, but as SRR was talking earlier, one of the things that has happened because of retirement is it's not so much at the same year where we look at someone reaching the minimum retirement age and retiring at 30 years of service. We're having people that goes beyond that now. Matter of fact, we have a lot of people that's at between the 40 and 50 years of service at Savannah River or in the federal government. What we need to do a little bit more of, and which we engage management and the senior supervisors, is to talk with the employees that are at the retirement level age and determine what their career path are. Normally it was 3 years after they reached retirement, eligibility retirement, then they would retire. Then that number moved to 5 years. Now it's up to 7 years.
Sheesh.
So that number is fluctuating because of the market and how much it's taking for people to retire. One of the things that we also did, and we're just doing again this month, coming up in August, we're bringing in consultants and associates in training to help people with their retirement planning, so they'll understand, okay, if I need to stay another year or 2 years, and once that planning come on board and they go through that process to understand what their annuity would be, then most of them end up staying another 3 to 5 years.
I can help you with that. On another side, SRNS, thank you for bringing up Buck Consulting again. We talked last year, has their forecast changed at all due to the markets?
Their market really hasn't changed. In fact, we made a decision for cost-saving purposes when we looked at the first 2 years when we actually ran it and paid to have that survey as part of what they're doing for us. And it stayed so similar that we've just decided to sit tight with that. And it is similar, because you're looking, it gives you a gross value. And so especially in the areas where we're concerned, engineers and in all the production operators, mechanics, lab techs, it wasn't markedly different.
When was the last time it was,
It's this year.
It was this year?
Mhm.
The reason I ask is, I mean, we've had a tremendous growth in the
We
last
have.
7 months.
Mhm.
And with what I do for a living,
Right.
I've had plenty of people come and say, well, I can afford to retire now.
Well, one of the things, just to add on, and I didn't talk about it, we have an online way that you can go on if you are a pension eligible person, and we've just rolled out a new model. I
I've
don't
seen
know
it,
if-
it's great.
I know, it's fantastic. So what it's doing is allowing people to go in, and it has more information available. And for people who are younger than myself, they can go in and forecast and set goals for the future. So, part of that is to help encourage people. I mean, as I said last year, to me, it's a circle of employment, and you've got to take a look at all of this in totality. So yes, if people have a pension and are ready to move on to that next aspect of life, we're happy for that to happen because we're filling in just, we bring them in as much as we can at entry-level positions and growing that. So we had that tool there to help people make better decisions.
And with that tool, have you had to deal with the Department of Labor's decisions?
No,
It hasn't affected you yet?
not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Gil, I'd like to follow up with something for you. On the federal side, when we start to ask managers, when are you planning on retiring, we'll get a fairly decent projection if you're speaking with the manager. But if you go on the federal staff side and you ask that same question, it's a little different dynamics. Folks begin to immediately respond back with, you're trying to force me out. And so different dynamics depending on the group that you're asking.
Robert Smith, Cab, Aiken, South Carolina. Between Mr. McLeod's presentation and your presentation, there's some very interesting information provided that I think is food for thought for the communities. If you look at the fact that per McLeod's presentation, 53% of the workforce is in Aiken, and a third of it's in Georgia and in 2 counties. And you look at the economic impact of that, and I'm, knowing myself in making career decisions about what job to take and what job not to take, location, economic, social environment had a lot to do with it. And I know Aiken, to a large extent, is recognized or thought of as a retirement community. I think some of us, many of us, are trying to change that to make it a more mixture of both. And I think it's important for the community to realize the economic impact across the board to things that are going on in our community as well as what's going on out here. And I applaud you for doing the work you're doing to improve your hiring skills and your retention of employees, because if you can hire them once and train them once, then your cost goes down and the economic impact is tremendous.
And I'd like to add some comments onto that. Bob, if everyone here would take your comments, what you just said is outstanding. We just finished, or this week, we'll wrap up our intern. We only brought 11 interns in this year, but we average about 20 per year. And one of the things that when we go through the process, when we bring these interns in, not all of them are located from this area or the South Carolina area. And that's one of the things they bring up is about, attracting jobs or attracting young folks or talents to the Aiken area. And I know Jack Craig, Terry Spears, and Thomas have talked to the Chambers of Commerce, but that's one of the things that because of the no nightlife or the retirement community, how Aiken is perceived and looked at, that's very important for us to try to provide those incentives to bring young talent here to the area. Absolutely.
Well, I'm 67, so my hill or my horizon is not as high as some of these others. But I do realize also that it takes a mixture of all of it, not only from the economic impact of it, but also the social aspect of it. And I think it is very important. And from John and my conversations, I know he's of the same feeling. And I think there's a general move, or we're trying to move in that direction. But I think if we can provide some impetus to that in any way with some of these numbers, I think it might help the public to understand the importance of doing some of the things. Because if say Mox is killed and they lose 1,000 people and 53% of them are coming from the Aiken area. That's $100 million negative impact to the local economy of Aiken. So what do you do from there? So I think those are important numbers to understand.
Kathy Patterson, CAB. SRS, you stated that the Aiken work keys are administered in the high schools and the tech schools. Which high schools are they administered in?
Well, I was asked by the superintendent of schools to supply it to them because it's my feeling based on the question that they offer it in all areas. It's my understanding.
Okay, so you don't know how that
I don't
information
know
is getting out? That
specifically,
would have to
no.
be some.
What they found, what we were trying to make a connection on, is that the particular inventories they were providing didn't line up with our needs and where we were utilizing them in each of the different categories. So I provided them with all that so they understood that. Also, the tech school has that also. That's open, free information.
Okay. And for the question for DOE and anybody else, is the VERA offered, the same type of VERA program offered at all the sites, or is it just for a DOE option?
Well, VERA is, of course, a government authority that could be offered to agencies. Right now, it was offered to all EM sites as far as, like I said, up to the end of June. We don't know if it's going to be offered for fiscal year 18. But DOE is working on a plan, which we all know with the President administration, to reshape the federal government and to downsize. It has been utilized for VERA and VSIP throughout different agencies. I'm not sure if, I know the memo for EPA is left, but if you've been reading news, they're looking at a major cut within EPA and some of the VERA and VSIP they're using for them as well. So we're looking at for seeing what happened by FY18.
Thank you.
John McMichael, CAB. I wanted to reiterate a couple of things. Number one, as you just said, the site is the biggest economic driver we have in our area. We've always had good communication between all the site folks, the contractors, and DOE with the city and the county. But I think it's come to a new and even a deeper level in the last year. We've had a tremendous amount of communication from Jack and Tom and Stuart and Carol especially. She's worked with me with some developers coming into the area just so that we let them know what the demographics are going to be in the future. And it's made a huge difference. I mean, I'm talking about people coming in and investing millions of dollars in our community. Plus, it also helps the different entities at the site, too, to retain, because, as you said earlier, we're able to accommodate the millennials and the younger folks that are coming in the community to want to live and work and play here, and we're working on that. Especially, I know one thing Carol and I've talked about several times is the downtown housing. These folks don't want to live in the suburbia. They want to live downtown where they can walk out the front door and go to a restaurant or whatever they want to do. So I applaud y'all for that. It's been a tremendous help to me in my job and hopefully for you and yours. But one of the things that we're talking about our younger folks when they're coming into the site, I have a very good friend that has 2 children that work out here at the site. They've been hired in the last 3 years. And one of them just surprised me the other day. They came over to visit their parents and stopped by and said they just got their clearance. Does it take a long time? They've been there for about 2 years. So.
Right. Of course, clearance time depends. We have focused on people getting that clearance more swiftly. Some of that is dependent, and we're really focusing on this, is when folks come, they have paperwork that they have to complete, and we're focusing to get that completed within 20 days or less. And what we had found in some cases, without focused attention on that, that was languishing up to 6 months or greater. And what we're finding, and I'm not going to remember the statistics, but we have significantly, by having focused attention on that, we've significantly reduced that time. A lot of times, though, obtaining a clearance depends on how many different places a person has lived, worked, and other information in their background. So that's probably for somebody, if they were hired 2 or 3 years ago, that doesn't surprise me. But we've focused in the last 6 to 9 months to decrease that time, and we are seeing that decrease. Because that's part of it. People come to work. And so when they don't have a clearance and are limited to where they can go and what they can do, it does impact it. So we have seen a reduction in that. We're working to reduce that even more by improving our hiring processes. So.
Well, you validated what I told them. I said they had lived in a number of different places.
That's right.
And I said that had to have complicated the research part of it.
It does.
But again, thank y'all so much for all that you do to support our community in so many different ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I see we have 3 more cards. I want to ask that we go through these last 3 questions briefly and get equally brief responses if we can so that we can hit our next steps. We're going to go David, Gil, and then wrap it up with Susan. She's going to finish for us.
Dave Vavagas, CAB. Quick question for DOE, please. I know there are a number of retired annuitants, federal annuitants in this area. Is SRS authorized or DOE authorized to hire any of these as reemployed annuitants?
We can hire reemployed annuitants, but I would tell you from a HR standpoint, when we look at those, we did hire one, but they take a significant loss. The amount of money they get for coming back into the federal government is not that much and adds to their retirement. So most of them, being honest, just go out and get a contractor type job or a support service contractor job, which is equally important to us. As a matter of fact, we did bring some back in the support service contractor role to help mentor some of our facility reps and nuclear engineering folks as well. So, but we can hire reemployed annuity. We don't have the DOD regulation that we can waive that payment where they don't have a reduction or stopping money. So we cannot do that. So, but we have hired one so far since this been going on. Thank you.
Gil Allen's, I know the Aiken Tech hasn't been able to fill the program, but I've heard about this program and it's amazing. Can you share just, quickly a little bit about it?
In terms of, they've had classes, they've graduated 1, 2, and 3, and they had anywhere from 12 to 16, and right now they have class 4 and 5 in place, and I think they're averaging around 13, 14 in number. Again, it's getting the word out and getting people to understand. Even within the folks that have graduated, not all of them have applied for jobs. I don't know the answer to that. But like I said, we've hired 20 of those folks that they've graduated.
And the cost I've heard are like anywhere from 10 to 20% of a 4-year college, and they're walking into a $60,000 a year job.
That's correct.
With the anticipation in 5 years of making a 6-figure job.
Well, that depends on what they choose to do, but yeah.
But the numbers are just mind-blowing. So, thank you.
Well, it's getting the word out. Again, like I said, I see the need to get down into the high schools because we need to capture these students, let them understand there is hope for a future, even if somebody is not driving them to that. And don't think that because you can't afford to go to a 4-year school that kind of future is unattainable to you. And trying to capture them, trying to develop, we're working right now with Apprenticeship Carolina out of Columbia to look at developing an apprenticeship program where it'd be a dual track in our mechanic areas. And so we'll see what we can do there. Again, this is my community. I was born and raised here, and so I want to continue to see growth and development.
Thanks.
And Susan, finish it off for us.
Just, excuse me, Susan Corbett, CAB. Just a quick question. I was back here. I was looking at this statement from the administration, the House Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, which is probably going to be on the floor this week or something. And the president seems to be opposed to MOX. He just basically says he doesn't want to fund it anymore. So all those folks that have been working on that, will they find jobs at the plant? Will they be retrained to be able to stay here, be able to kind of recycle them into the program?
I would expect there'd be some number of those. As you can see, we're doing a great deal of hiring that we would be able to take a look at. They can certainly apply for our jobs. We have had people from MOX apply for some of our vacancies and already leave employment and come to work with us. But, I know we can afford to hire some of those individuals.
The same with SRR. The key is to apply, and they'll be considered.
And the same for DOE Savannah River as well. We have a partnership with NNSA and looking at what people are available and their qualification, and we are looking at how we want to take some of those individuals on if that does happen.
That's good because I paid attention to Rick McLeod's report about the hit that we would take as a community to lose that program, and it's not looking too good. So it's good to hear that we can reuse those folks.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, I know that right now we're scheduled to start our public comment period. With that being said, I'm noticing a lot of shifting around the room. So what we're going to do is we're not going to cut the amount of time for public comment. We're still going to allot the 30 minutes that we have scheduled if needed. But what I am going to say is let's take a 10-minute break. Let's everybody get back here. If you can get back in your seats before the 15 till, will be good. get this show on the road and get us all on the road.
You did that yesterday. I know, I keep doing it. Maybe I belong over there.
I'm going to give everybody a moment to find their seats. Really, I'm just waiting for Nina. You're not the last one to sit. It's okay. I just like picking on you because it's fun. So, hang on. You may notice that your travel voucher is mysteriously double-sided, and that's because I accidentally printed it that way. And so, exactly. So if after you're done with your travel voucher and you've signed it, please give it to Chelsea so that she can flip it over and give it to the next set of people who need their travel voucher. Because, of course, well, no, we printed them double-sided with everybody's names on them, so of course, yeah. You'll see, when it comes to you, you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It's a fun time was had by all. Yeah. It's like, and compare mileage. Instead of comparing hobbies, it's like the icebreaker, the whole different. All right, folks, so let's get settled down and let's move into our public comment period. First up, we have Lindsay Harper with Georgia Wand. If you'd like to get us started with your public comment. And as she comes up, I'd like to remind everybody that this is the public comment period, so this isn't going to be questions for the CAB or questions about our topics that we've done. It's just comments made to the board.
Okay. I'm actually not Lindsay Harper. I'm Janie Scott from Georgia 1. I'm number 2 on the list. She'll come after me.
Okay.
We just want to thank the DOE for their continued support of remop activities. The community talks kicked off yesterday. They were successful. We had a good turnout, and we are very excited about what's happening in Burke County. I'm also a Burke County resident. Okay, and the only other statement I had was Georgia 1, as well as some of the residents, do have a concern about increased tritium extraction. And because when there was an air monitoring station in 2002, levels were elevated. They weren't at the maximum levels, but they were elevated. So there's a concern about that still in the area.
Now how about Lindsay?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Harper. I'm from Georgia Wand also. Georgia Wand has a concern that the budget has increased for Canyon H, and we think that instead of more processing, perhaps we can cap the storage until there's a permanent repository found. But at the same time, there's a question of what are some of the environmental effects of the reprocessing? Definitely interested to hear more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Annie Stevens?
Good evening. Thank you all for the information that you have shared concerning science, technology, education, math. My question is, what is the spirit of, from this body to humanity and the people, particularly in Shell Bluff and the outside community? Because this is, Burke County is my home and my family. And I understand even more now the fear of the people in the community and you all connecting with the people to that you care about the people. See, the people are dying of cancer, you know, with SRS and Plant Vogel right there together, and we're right under the shadow of the plant. And as I've always said, even to this body and to the people of Burke County, to fight not the hand that give them their bread, but this I do say, call the name Jesus, so that he will have mercy upon us all, and we come together to meet the science part of it, the technical part of it, as well as the educational part of it, the math, and the spirit part of humanity, so that we as a people can be saved. Amen. Do anybody? And I can understand the fear of the people of the community not wanting to be a part of or come to the meetings because of fear, and the education of the people of this body, because they are what you call uneducated people. They're poor, and they work for Savannah River Site. My daddy worked at the bum plant. My brother retired from Savannah River Site and the community to work at Georgia Power. So that is my public comment, that we as humanity and human beings, because what will affect one will affect all, that we might be saved. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We still have a little bit of time left for our public comment period. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Joe Ortaldo is.
Joe Ortaldo, Public. I wasn't going to make a comment, but the last couple presentations, I want to thank the people who gave them. But one thing, just remind the CAB, Rick told you how important the site is as far as the economic well-being of the community, how many dollars come with each person that's working out there. The HR guys were showing how they're pretty much covering what we need in the way of manpower in the near term. But in the long term, and I'm talking like 15, 20 years out there, if everybody is successful in the programs that they're having at the site, SRR, some of SRNS's work, there's going to be quite a few thousand people less out at the site. So for the economic well-being of the community, I think the CAB has to consider, when new proposals are made for new things at the site, be careful before you say no to any of them. Some of them you're not going to want, some of them don't belong coming to the site. But on the other hand, it's important for Aiken, for the people in Aiken and the area. I use Aiken as a general, almost a CSRA area. But please be open-minded when new things are considered for the site. Don't say no until you've got all the facts. And one thing you might want to ask DOE to do is, at least when I was on the CAB for 6 years, they had some charts that were just showing what the site population would be if no new things came to the site. And there's a very dramatic drop-off. And I'm pretty sure that they still have those charts, or they've updated them. Mike, do they still have those? These are the charts where you were showing present population, and if no new things came to the site, what the site population would go down to. I think you'll find that very enlightening and give you a pretty good idea what the impact would be for the area if the site does not get new acceptable operations underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Okay. So now we're going to go into our recommendation voting. If everybody wants to pull out their copies, I'm sure everyone made notes. I want you to pause and think for a moment about all the debates you had yesterday, the discussions you had, the different opposing views. I'm sure everyone has had some time to think about it overnight and come to a real decision on what it is that they want to do and what they want to see this board do. Because this is what you're about, making these recommendations to the department. Here's what the past day and a half has been about. So, Nina, let's start with drone spotting.
Nice and easy. All right, so it's just going to be nice and simple. The first one is drone spotting over SRS. Would somebody like to make a motion to vote on this recommendation? Perfect. Do we have a second?
Second.
Perfect. Is there any other discussion that you want to bring up other than what we talked about yesterday on this recommendation? Okay, hearing none. If you would like to vote yes for this recommendation moving forward, please do so by signaling a raising of your right hand.
Raise it nice and high so I can get them all. 1, 2, 3.
My voice feels so cracky.
13, 23.
Okay, all opposed? All abstained? Good, one down. So the second one is the curation facility. Again, do we have a motion to move forward with this recommendation? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Perfect. Any discussion on this topic? Hearing none, if you're in favor of moving this recommendation forward, please do so by signaling your right hand.
Again, nice and high, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22.
Okay, all those opposed? And all those abstaining? Perfect, thank you. The third one is on H Canyon. Do we have a motion to vote? Dawn? Do we have a second? Second, good. Do we have any new discussion from yesterday on this recommendation? Good, hearing none. If you are in favor of voting on this recommendation and bringing it forward, please do so by signaling your right hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Perfect. Any abstentions? Any oppositions? Thank you. The fourth one is the opposed consolidated interim storage of SNF and high-level waste at SRS. Do we have a motion? David? Do we have a second? Second. Do we have any further discussion on this recommendation than what we had yesterday? Good. Hearing none, if you are in favor of moving this recommendation forward, please do so by signaling of your right hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Okay, all those opposed, please signify by raising of your right hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And then all those abstaining, I guess it's just me. And then the fifth recommendation is the one that we spent a lot of time talking about yesterday. And after a lengthy discussion about it, I think the consensus was to bring it back to committee, talk about it a little bit more, iron out some of the differences, and then bring it back to the full committee back in September. And that is not neglecting the recommendation or not putting it off, but I think the goal is to try to get it to the point where it has the best chance of getting passed and moving forward. So we will be discussing that at the committee meeting in August, and it will be back for full board discussion in September.
It was officially tabled, right? It was tabled.
It was tabled to be talked about. Does anyone have any other questions or feedback on any of those recommendations? Good, hearing none. What? I'm sorry, what? You have no, there are no things left. I see recommendation, and then I see adjourn.
I assure you, there's things.
Okay, well, we have a comment.
We have one thing over here, please.
Dave Babakis, CAB. James, I was just wondering, on the two recommendations that David Hoyle wrote, do you have a breakdown of the how many favorable and unfavorable emails, text messages, any other correspondence that you received? How many were in favor, how many were not in favor?
No, I haven't had a chance to really comb through it and put them in a column yet. Okay. And so if that's something that you feel like you need for the committee meeting, that's something we can do. Okay. Something else I'd like you to do, again, we know that with the German fuel, this is going to come back up for those of you on the Nuclear Materials Committee. So those of you attending, think about the changes that you would need to move you one way or another. What would it take for you to say yes to this recommendation, and what would it take for you to bring the other side into your point of view? Think about what you need to help each other come to a consensus on this. Another thing that I'm going to ask you to do, just a housekeeping bit, every one of you has a big pile of presentations in front of you. I'm pretty sure I saw everybody write notes on almost everything you've got. So please take those with you, review them before the next committee meetings, bring those notes with you to the committee meeting so that we can have a more robust discussion on these topics that you just learned all about, okay? We have one question over here, and then we'll come back over.
Robert Smith, pursuant to what you just said, though, what do you want us to do once we've come to that analysis of what we want? Do you want us to email it
Ooh, I want you to bring it to the committee meeting, and we'll have that discussion then.
But why not get it out there so that the committee has a chance to review it before, so that they can interact with it?
That's fine. I mean, if you have a rewrite that you want to propose or something like that, then yeah, by all means, send it to me. We'll put it as part of the meeting announcements. And
You know, well, I don't want to.
what I want to make sure that we do is, if we share information, I want to make sure that you don't get into a back and forth via email of, oh, well, if you made this change, then I would, oh, well, I'll do this. I want to make sure that we keep that debate actually in the public. So if you do have some direct comments that you want to make or some direct changes, send it to me. We'll make sure that it's part of the meeting materials. You do have a chance to look at it and think about it. I just ask that you hold off on commenting on the comments until we get in the room. Okay? Is there anything else around the table before I give it to Nina?
All right, well, thank y'all so much for coming, and I appreciate all of your hard work. I've got Earl.